It has been 1 year since AEW debuted on TNT with their show Dynamite. So today, that is what we are going to cover, the past year of AEW, plus a little bit more because they did have a couple pay-per-views before they had TV. But we'll talk about all that fun stuff. We'll talk about where various people who were on the first show, where they are today. We'll do some following of title lineage, and then we will address some various critiques and things they could do better, and all that fun stuff, and whatever other topics we want to cover. I have a whole host of co-hosts with me today, so we're going to do this roundtable style. I will try to direct traffic as much as possible. So thanks everybody for tuning into That's Wrestling. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you can watch this over on YouTube live. Go check out the link in the show notes and all that fun stuff. And that's all I'm going to do for announcements today. So let's get into it. I have with me Darryl W. Perry. How's it going, man? And apparently you can't hear me.
You know what? I muted myself on my handy little.
All right. Well,
thing.
You're on.
Yeah, Botchamania, I guess. Yeah. So good to be on. This is actually the first AEW show that you've had me on. So it'll be interesting to talk all things All Elite.
All right. And then I have Caleb Johnson.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's my first time here with the show. Just a little bit of background on myself. Probably a somewhat recent wrestling fan from the past 10 years or so. Mostly keep up with a lot of New Japan, AEW, a bit of WWE as well. Less so lately, but maybe that's just a critique we could speak about later. But I've really been into AEW, enjoyed the first year, and I'm really excited to take part in this discussion tonight.
Awesome. And I have Trae Wisecarver.
Hey, Eric, I'm here all the time. I'm already sick of you. What's
okay. So we'll move on. Dave Colarusso. How's it going, man?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me back. You probably heard me on here a few times before. I generally do the pay-per-views with Eric after their quarterly pay-per-view.
All right, awesome. So let's get into it. Of course, we are just over a year now. Today is October 10th, and they started October 2nd of 2019. So we're a year and a couple days afterwards. So I wanted to go through and talk about who was actually on the first episode of Dynamite, and then we'll go on into some critiques and all that fun stuff. So let's actually just start it out. The opening match for Dynamite last year was Cody versus Sammy Guevara, and I have to say right off the bat, obviously both of them elevated huge from the first show and going on. So Darryl, why don't you give us your take on these two stars?
So I'll say that Sammy has definitely grown on me, especially since what was it, Double or Nothing, where he had the match with Kip Sabian, and I didn't know who either of those two were. And I was like, who's this guy? And like the panda outfit, like this is just weird. But you know, he put on a good match then, and even though he's hanging out with a group of total assholes, you know, he's growing on me as a performer. Not that I necessarily am a fan of his per se, but you know, I think he's only going to continue moving up. And I think having him go up against Cody in the very first match was probably, you know, Tony Khan and company putting a lot of faith on him because you want your first match on your first televised show to be a really good match. And we know that Cody can have a good match with anybody. So, you know, and obviously Cody, the new and second-time TNT champion. I do have some critiques about the way they announced him having won the his second title there. But we can talk about that later.
All right. Next up, we had MJF and Brandon Cutler. Trae, why don't you take this one?
So MJF is obviously the one that everybody has had their eye on because he's just he's a young Roddy Piper. He's phenomenal. Brandon Cutler is obviously this was his first loss in AEW and the first of many, and it's been a whole storyline if you watch Dark and or Being the Elite that Brandon Cutler is a loser. So this was the beginning of two important stories here: MJF's march to stardom and Brandon Cutler's incredible losing streak.
Then we also had Pac and Hangman Page. Caleb, why don't you talk about these guys?
Sure. So I recently rewatched the first episode of Dynamite. AEW's YouTube page put up the entire full episode commercial free, which I think is a really cute touch for their 1-year anniversary. I really like it. But I was recently reviewing this, and I came across this match, and I actually didn't remember what the result was. So I watched the match. Obviously, it was very good. 2 incredible workers in the ring. And I was surprised that Pac, or Pac, however you want to pronounce it, went over in that match. And I was kind of surprised. I was like, wait, I thought, because in my head, especially recently, you've got Hangman on this real story here. And I was really surprised that Pac went over. And it kind of made me realize that the entire, COVID situation across the globe obviously had a huge effect on the wrestling industry and AEW in particular when it comes to international stars. This match made me want so much to know what they would have done with Pac, or Pac. I'll say Pac. I'll commit to one. But I really want to know what they would have done with him over the past year, especially since, the March time frame, if he had been able to be on Dynamite every week. I miss him so much. I forgot how much I miss him until now. And I was surprised to see Hangman lose in his very first televised, granted he was on pay-per-view, but in his first Dynamite TV match. Now, he didn't tap. He passed out to Pac's submission, but it was still an amazing match and made me really, really long for what they might have done with him had he been able to be there the entire year.
Trae, did you have something to add on this one?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm really, really sad that this pandemic ruined my favorite new stable in wrestling with the greatest name of all time, Death Triangle. That we only got like one Death Triangle match before the world got shut down and Pac hasn't been back, and then now the Lucha Bros are with Eddie Kingston, so I guess that's over with. So, pour one out for the Death Triangle that could have been.
Then next up, we had Riho defeating Nyla Rose to be the first AEW Women's Champion. Dave, what do you take on this?
I don't think anyone saw that coming, to be honest. I mean, Riho was being billed at 98 pounds. Nyla's clearly over 200, so it was definitely a David versus Goliath. And either way, whoever won, it was going to be a positive outcome. Because if you look at Nyla Rose's transgender background versus Riho being a Japanese international star, either way is going to be a positive champion to push ahead.
What do you think? How do you think they dealt with Riho's first reign?
Kind of weak, but I do understand she had bookings in other promotions at the same time. I do get that it was a smart move to start pushing the Joshi era of it, but at the same time, if they were going to go full in on Riho, they should have gone full in on Riho, and I think they kind of were a little lackluster in it.
All right, and then the final match that was on the first card was Jericho, Santana, and Ortiz defeating the Elite, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. So there's a lot to talk about here. We have Jericho and Santana and Ortiz already getting together as part of the Inner Circle, though it hadn't been called the Inner Circle yet until I believe the next night or the next week. And then we have the Elite of the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, whose story throughout this year has evolved quite a lot, with Kenny Omega holding tag team gold before the Young Bucks with Adam Page, and that actually being a quite lengthy run going back to January on the Jericho Cruise when they actually won the titles, and then moving all the way up until a couple weeks ago when they lost the titles to FTR. Daryl, what's up?
Yeah, and I think I speak for all of us in saying that I'm surprised that Kenny Omega has not had a singles title yet in AEW.
Dave.
I gotta say, I think them losing was a good thing on the first episode, because they're gonna bring back what hasn't been seen in a long time in American pro wrestling, is long-term booking. This was the very, very beginning of the crumbling of the Elite, so you can watch respectively on their own basis. Watch the Young Bucks turn heel, watch Kenny Omega turn heel, which he definitely is right now. He's starting to wear the aviators again. So I'm actually cool with the fact they lost. It does kind of a bummer that he hasn't had a singles singles title yet, but it's coming. It's a guarantee at this point. And I'm okay that it takes time, because when it finally happens, it's going to absolutely rock.
And then at the end of this match, we had the showing up debut of Jake Hager, which I don't think anybody was expecting to happen. Was it a worthwhile surprise at the end of the first Dynamite, or did it end up coming a bit flat because it was the former Jack Swagger? So Trey, why don't you touch that one?
Okay, so I think of it as that we had to have a Lex Luger moment, right? Lex Luger on the first Nitro. We had to have the debut, and Jack Swagger is a pretty decent Lex Luger, I think. And I have always been a fan of Jake Hager as a pro wrestler, and like just this past year, he's like that hasn't changed. Like he's still good. He's still like been phenomenal in this role. The program earlier this year with Dustin, and just a lot of the stuff that he's been involved with. But I don't know, when it comes to just, as a big guy, sort of, he's in that heater role with Jericho. I was as baffled as anyone when Jake Hager was the debut on the first episode of Dynamite, but I think that he's performed in the role incredibly well.
Caleb, what do you have to add?
Well, I totally had forgotten that he debuted on this episode until I recently watched it just a couple nights ago. And when he did his run-in, first of all, I want to highlight the importance of the crowd of AEW. Because having watched WWE for so long, and not to start the WWE AEW comparisons already, but sometimes the crowd is not giving the response in WWE that I think they're necessarily looking for. It happens with the sweetening and multiple different ways that they kind of adjust a little bit what the crowd reaction is. But AEW's crowd all year has been genuine. And they have really gotten behind Riho for one. And there are certain people that I think they've latched onto, and they've also provided great reactions. So when he came out, I know they chanted "We the People," but they were excited for something to happen. They really made it feel important. And I do want to highlight Jim Ross for his ups and downs this year. He made Jake Hager feel very special. He said he was an undefeated, champion in Bellator, or I'm not sure if he's a champion, but at least an undefeated fighter. And Hager looked good. Like, he came out there, he was clotheslining people left and right. I think his debut really was impressive. And mixed with that positive crowd reaction, it actually really worked for me on a rewatch. I thought it was really good.
Daryl.
So we know that Hager and Jericho are teaming as a tag team. Do they actually have a name where, like, when Jericho was tagging with Sammy, they were Les Sex Gods? And then, it seems like whenever two people get thrown together or decide to start tagging, they come up with some kind of name, whether it be the super bad death squad that gets changed and then one of the guys just like gets Thanos away from TV forever.
No, I don't think they had a name for Jake Hager and yet. Yes, we'll see, because
and we know that both of them are big Trump supporters. So can we call them like the Maggots? MAGATS. TS.
I guess we will
real
see
life
how that
heels.
goes.
The real life heels, I think, would be a good one.
Yeah, well, I think we got a problem because I think Jericho is going to start heading down the face route within the next 6 months, anyways. So we'll see how that turns out. And as remember that a few weeks ago that Jericho did talk about him and Hager going after the tag team gold. So they haven't really readdress that since that promo, but I'm assuming they're going to start heading down that road in the next couple weeks and start making some inroads, maybe even going into Full Gear or heading up to Revolution in February if that's kind of where they're heading. So I guess we will see. Anybody want to address any of the people that we had talked about in their past year from the first show?
Guevara is great. Like he's another Texas guy, so he was another guy that like I first started seeing when I moved here like 5 years ago. So I started seeing him at Wrestle Circus, and then like he started getting booked in PWG. So I've watched him go from this really promising young independent guy to a star on national TV, and just it makes me happy every time I see Sammy because I watched him get there, and I loved him being in the opening match on the first Dynamite. I love that whole UFC style video package. I wish that I had hoped that they were going to do that more regularly, and then they got away from that because they really wanted to focus on ring time, which is good and bad. But yeah, I just wanted to take a second to put over Sammy Guevara.
Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with that on Sammy Guevara. The first time I saw him was when he faced Kip Sabian, and I immediately liked Kip Sabian. But Sammy Guevara grew on me as a performer, and not just a performer. I'd say as a human being. When people discovered that slip up, that comment he had 4 years ago on Sasha Banks, he took absolute ownership of it. Changed his way. So he didn't just grow up as a performer, he's growing up as a person too in front of us, which is very, very interesting to watch.
Yeah, how old is he anyways? 24, 23, 24?
I think it's even younger.
About 24, 25.
Yeah. So out of everybody on this card, let's see. We have Cody, Sammy Guevara, MJF. I'll skip Brandon Cutler because I'll come back in a second. Pac, Hangman Page, Riho, Nyla Rose, Jericho, Santana Ortiz, and the Elite.
Sammy Guevara is 27.
27. Oh, he's a little
No
older than I
way,
thought.
really?
Still, he was 23 when he made the comment. That still shows growth.
Yeah.
So all of them, everyone who had a match on the first episode, besides Brandon Cutler, do we see all of these people eventually holding either the AEW World Championship, Jericho of course already has, or the tag titles where we have Omega and Hangman already have, but the rest, Cody, Sammy Guevara, MJF, Pac, Hangman Page, and then Santana Ortiz and the Young Bucks. Do we all see them either holding the world title or the tag titles if they're a team at some point in the near future?
Well, Cody can't hold the world title, so. But yeah.
Well, are we going to include TNT title in that?
No, we're going world title. So Darryl.
I think Cody there could be some kind of way that, Cody wins a match with a stipulation that grants him the authority to go after the world title.
There is always a way, but I don't think they're going.
He's not going to Vince McMahon himself into the title.
I think that the idea is that TNT belt is going to be Cody's belt for as long as Cody's the guy.
Well, as long as he's a face.
That's the plan.
I do think that everybody on that show, minus Cutler, will hold a title at some point.
Caleb.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. If we expand it, I think to the TNT title also, I think Santana, Ortiz, the Bucks, those guys have potential as single stars. Especially in my opinion, Nick Jackson has a lot of potential. He's kind of the Jeff Hardy of the two, I think. However, just to your point, Eric, as long as Cody is a face, I do not believe that he will hold the world championship. I do think, and in fact, I think they should make that a key part of his heel turn eventually. And I do think that Cody, before, I would even say in the next, maybe not year, but I would say in the next 2 years, I think Cody will be AEW world champion, and I think it'll be as a heel.
Yeah, I think they will probably go that way as well. And remember that the stipulation is only a self-imposed stipulation on himself. That was not some sort of official decree by AEW. Dave.
I agree with what he just said about heel Cody. That'll just further embed him in that slow burn heel turn. And I gotta say, for all the other people potentially holding that AEW world title, I'd say if I had to guess the next three in order: Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, then Pac or MJF.
Daryl.
Oh, I was just counting the three.
All right.
I do think that you're going to start seeing a feud between, actually an in-ring feud instead of just sort of the behind-the-scenes feud between Omega and Hangman. Which, it's already sort of started to build, especially with Omega's promo that was done where they were talking about everybody else in the tournament for number one contendership for the AEW, where he's like, I'll fight anybody. I don't care if it's a tag wrestler like Hangman Adam Page or a single star or, Hangman Adam Page. And like he mentioned Hangman like 5 times at least. And then when it went back to commentary, it was really good where they're like, somebody else said he protests too much. And of course, Excalibur had to correct Jim Ross on what the actual Shakespeare quote was. But Jim Ross needs to retire.
All right.
He's starting to get senile. And, especially you mentioned it in your review a couple weeks ago, where Miro renamed the accolades to Game Over, and JR kept wanting to call it the accolades. Even after he was corrected, no, I'm pretty sure it's the Game Over. Well, I give him accolades for using whatever it is.
All right. Well, since Daryl opened the topic, let's talk about the commentary that has been going on. For the most part, we have JR, Tony Schiavone, and Excalibur on commentary. My personal opinion has been that it's been fine. Of course, JR does slip up here and there, and I don't know. The grumpy JR is kind of growing on me. And has been growing on me. It kind of adds a little bit of entertainment to this. So, Dave.
I do get where you're coming from about that he needs to retire, but I wouldn't say yet. I think when they originally put him with Tony Schiavone, they were trying to get like a sense of nostalgia for things that were occurring 20 years ago. He should be on a leash. He has said some out of touch things that really shows his age, but I think you put him on a leash, he could really make himself more of like a Bobby Heenan kind of role. Not necessarily an outright heel, but just literally a frumpy old man.
What about for commentary in general?
I'm okay with him. I mean, if you want to reel him back a little bit to kind of like, I don't know, quote, teach him a lesson, or just have him for pay-per-views, that'd be fine with me. Because even Excalibur, I'd say if you want Excalibur, I'm trying to blank. Who's the other one?
Tony Schiavone.
Oh yeah, Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Taz. That would be a great combination right there. Then bring JR in for the pay-per-views.
Yeah, I've really been a fan when they did have that combo up of Taz, Tony Schiavone, and Excalibur. Tony he's been out of wrestling for a while, and he slowly came back in. I believe a year before AEW started, he was doing stuff with MLW. Tony Schiavone seems to be having the time of his life right now, and I think it comes across in his commentary, and it just makes me smile when I hear him just having a great time. Trae, what do you have on that?
I vehemently disagree with this slander against Jim Ross. Now, I get what you guys are saying, and he's, I think he's very well used. I think that the AEW commentary team that they have crafted is very effective, okay? You have got Excalibur, who's the wrestling nerd who knows what all the flippy doos and zabadas are called. And you've got Tony Schiavone, who is just pure, unrestrained, childlike, puppy-like joy at being back in wrestling after all these years. And then you have Jim Ross, who knows how to sell the gravity of a big moment. And nobody is better at Jim Ross than selling the big match. And I remember I was really struck by this during the go home angle for All Out with MJF and Moxley, where you really get, that's when JR shines. And that's why when people are talking about only having JR on pay-per-view and not on TV, like, no, why? That is the worst possible thing. You need that voice, that trusted voice on TV that knows how to get across the importance of this is the big match. And so yeah, I don't think that he should be the lead announcer anymore, and I'm sure that he would think that too. But my God, this company needs him on their announce crew so much, and I don't, present company accepted, but I think a lot of people really are applying the wrong lens to what they think a wrestling announcer is supposed to be, and do not consider what he's there for, which is to be a wrestling announcer and get people and angles and matches over. And when it comes to that, he is still Jim Ross.
Caleb.
Yeah, when they first started up with Jim Ross, now mind you, I told you guys earlier that my wrestling fandom started probably between 5 and 10 years ago. I didn't know a lot of Jim Ross. I was used to Michael Cole on WWE commentary. And when I saw Jim Ross back, I thought, okay, nostalgia. They're going to try to, bring home those disenfranchised fans. And I have to say, he's grown on me over the last year, 100%. Trae, I think you're 100% right. He sells big moments. No one better. Again, he makes some comments, maybe he doesn't know exactly what the name of a move is called, but I don't think he's replaceable at this point. I think they need him to continue. And on the point about Tony earlier, one thing I love about what they've done with Tony Schiavone is that not only is he a part of the commentary team, but he is also one of their default interviewers and announcers. His stuff, and I don't want to get too far into what were our favorite moments this year, not yet anyway, but his stuff that he did with Britt Baker is probably some of my favorite all-time AEW material. When she called him Mr. Starbucks and he looked all sad and she said, "Stand up straight, Tony," and he stood up straight. I think this guy has a lot more potential than just commentary team. I think they're using him very, very well. And it's incredible to me to think that he was out of wrestling for so long. I think he's invaluable, and I think that their commentary team, they have moved people to the correct roles. I think Alex Marvez needed to be moved. I think, Golden Boy, they had him for a while in the beginning. I thought he was a great addition, but I think they're really using people to their correct potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, really, the announce team, or at least announcers they have on roster, is deep. So even if somebody can't make it, they have so many people who can fill in. One, we saw Jericho throughout the first 5 or 6 episodes of the quarantine era being filmed in the Nightmare Factory, or whatever it's called, QT Marshall's place. Yeah. So, right there we have Jericho. He showed he could be on color commentary for the rest of his life once he retires, and that would be perfectly fine. But we also have Taz, who is a great announcer as well. He's been doing, of course, a lot of AEW Dark. And now we have Veda Scott, who has joined over there as well. And she did the women's tournament, and now she does some stuff over on Dark as well. You also have Colt Cabana, who is an excellent color commentator as well. He's been doing it for years over with ROH and New Japan, on and off throughout the years. So you have so many people who can step in, and even they could even start rotating among commentary teams if they needed to just spice things up once in a while, give somebody a break for a few weeks and all that fun stuff. Daryl, what's up?
All right, so I want to propose something because I know that Eric, your favorite announcer of all time is Alex Marvez. So why don't we just get rid of Alex Marvez altogether? Move Jim Ross into sort of the Mean Gene Okerlund role of doing the backstage interview style things. Because I could see JR in a really good Mean Gene role.
JR has been excellent with the pre-tapes that they've done, or the sit-down interviews. The one he did with Santana was excellent. He did one with Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, and the Bucks when prior to their Revolution pay-per-view match. That was excellent. And yeah, I could give or take with having JR on commentary. It's not a make or break for me personally.
And then bring either Golden Boy or Veda Scott on Dynamite.
I would be in favor of either of those. Golden Boy was excellent when he was on there, but he's only there for the one or two shows prior to Dynamite happening, but he was really good. But I think he's probably got a lot more on his plate and probably can't do a full time with Dynamite, because he's more of a Mauro Ranallo type of guy where he's not just doing wrestling, where as JR basically Dynamite is his only job. Excalibur Dynamite is pretty much his only job right now, besides PWG once in a while, and Tony Schiavone, same thing, it's his only job. But Golden Boy probably doesn't have the time. But Veda Scott, I would love to have Veda Scott over there as a full-time commentator. Trae.
Isn't Tony's regular job still baseball, like calling baseball?
He does college football in the fall, but that's on a Saturday, so that's not a big deal. So that's why he wasn't on the pay-per-view in November last year, because football was going on, so he had to sit out that particular one.
Does he not? I thought he was like the announcer for some Atlanta Braves farm team, but I don't know.
I know he used to do that. I don't know if he still does.
Yeah, I just know he still does the Saturday night college football once in a while. So,
and let's talk about Taz a little bit, because it's nothing personal against Taz. Because I do think he's a good announcer. I just don't like when you have active managers that are also announcing, especially when one of their guys is in the match. It just comes off as very obnoxious, and I get that that's what they're going for. But even when Jericho was, doing some of the fill-in, he just came off as very obnoxious because he was screaming the whole time.
Yeah, I guess that is a thing that happened, because Taz was doing commentary prior to him creating or being part of Team Taz. So that worked, but now that he does have his own faction, it would make sense for them to pull him until until he's no longer a manager. But of course, using him as a manager is still a good role for him, because he's always been a really good talker. And even prior to him joining AEW, he had his podcast that he did every single morning for 3 hours, and he always had stuff to say. So he's always been a good talker and always can come up with something spur of the moment. But it would make sense to pull him off commentary, except for maybe once in a while sitting in like he did just for Brian Cage's match this week. That's the only match that he was on commentary for, and that would kind of make sense that he jumps on when a guy he's managing, but being on other matches and then also matches that his guys are in does seem a little counterintuitive to me as well. Dave?
So I would actually disagree with that. Having guys like him come on and Chris Jericho come on and just be obnoxious is part of that good heel work, because then they're always promoting their guy in the back of your head. You're always just thinking, Brian Cage is a bad guy. He's got this pain in the ass manager. Ricky Starks, Sammy Guevara, Proud and Powerful Santana Ortiz, and every time they're just pushing him, you're disliking them even more, and you're going to keep leaning more and more towards that face. You're like, God, I want this guy to win just to shut Taz up. And then when it does happen, it's everyone wins.
Yeah, it can be done, I think. I mean, Bobby the Brain Heenan, he had done some of that as well when managing and commentating at the same time. So people can do it, and it is difficult. Taz, I think, does a pretty decent job when he's in there still, because he's still putting over the other talent as well. They're usually backhanded comments, but, since you're a heel, they're going to be backhanded comments as well anyway. So again, I can go either way, but I prefer him not to be a commentator all the time. If he's going to also be a manager, I think it would be better left when you have commentators that are not as connected to the talent in the ring. I think it tends to make a slightly better commentary experience, if you will. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about how they have been doing with character work. I think this, or at least for me, has been an ongoing ever since the beginning of AEW, that their character work seems to be lacking in spots really early on. For probably the first 3 or 4 months, they seem to be really lacking on promo packages, video packages, except for Cody Rhodes, pretty much. Cody had the only good packages. And then they also put some of the really good packages over on Dark, but didn't bother taking the minute and a half to put it on Dynamite the next night. I remember Britt Baker had really early on a really good video package that aired on Dark, but it did not even 30 seconds of it touch Dynamite, and I think that was a huge loss. And I still think they have some issues with it. We talked about it this week with Will Hobbs prior to his match with Brian Cage. They did not do a video package for him. They haven't had any sort of sit down with him either. And then during the match, we have Excalibur telling the story about how his brother shielded him from gunfire and he lost his life while protecting Will Hobbs. That seems like that should have been in a video package prior to Will Hobbs coming into the ring. So as far as some of these video packages or lack thereof, are they at least heading slightly down the right path, or we still have a decent way to go on this, Dave?
I'm cool with I do get, yes, I agree with the fact that their promo and character work in the first few months was lacking, but they're also finding their footing, which I get. So for me, it's just literally a new guy at the job, and it wasn't a big deal for me. I'm okay with it.
How about what they're doing now?
I'm fine with what they're doing now, and actually, I'm thinking about the Dark thing. You and I spoke about this once before. They need to be pushing Dark on Dynamite, because you and I were talking about, every week I forget to watch Dark because it's not in my mind.
Yeah. That's one thing they've been. they've been poor at promoting Dark. They have been putting kind of that crawler on the bottom, showing who won various matches, but they rarely ever even have a promo for just a 30-second blip coming in or going out to a commercial to promote Dark. And I remember I was there for the second Dynamite, and on Dark that week was the Kenny Omega versus Joey Janela Lights Out match. They did not do anything to promote that, and that was an amazing match. And before the COVID era, when they were having, regular 3 matches, 3 or 4 at most, now they're doing like 40 of them. But
sorry,
go for it, Dave.
It really is a shame too, because like it's not a lot of outside the ring character work, but if you want to sit down and watch just in ring pro wrestling, Dark's where it's at. It's just match after match after match, the occasional well put together promo package, and it's a shame they're not pushing it.
Caleb, about the story development and on Dark, if you want to touch that too.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm in the same boat about forgetting to watch Dark. I don't think there's enough promotion for that. I totally agree with that point. I do wish that I remembered to watch it, because once in a while this, blazing match will come up and people will say, oh, you have to watch Dark this week. And of course, I won't have already watched it. But I have to say, I think I disagree about the storytelling. I do think they could be doing more promo packages. I think they could build their characters better. I think that's always possible. But I think that they are presenting a good alternative. When I hate to keep saying WWE, but I watch Raw and I watch 4 in-ring talking segments, and I'm sitting here like, when is our next match? And the next match comes on and it's a 5-minute DQ. AEW provides great in-ring action, and I think a substantial amount of storytelling in ring. I don't think there's a single person on Dynamite who I look at and go, what is this guy about? No, I know because I watch the matches, and I understand week by week. It might take a little longer, but I understand what they're all about. I understand that Jon Moxley is, just unscripted violence. I know even Will Hobbs. I think I have a good sense for what his character is just watching the matches. And, even little promos. The one that pops into mind for me is Ricky Starks, one of his first promos that he cut when he first aligned with Taz and Brian Cage. They gave him a minute in Gorilla with a mic, and I knew what he was about. He gave me a synopsis for his character, went out, and then has shown it every week with Darby Allin and some of the other guys he's working with. So I would say that while they could do more, I don't think that it's not enough. In fact, I really prefer their method of storytelling, which is primarily based in the ring.
Let's see who else wanted to touch that one. Darryl?
Yeah, I think Trae had raised his hand a minute ago. I'll let him go first.
Yeah, and I agree on the storytelling aspect, and I'm a big fan of in-ring just storytelling through wrestling. But Dark, I'm a big fan of Dark because I love C shows and always have. I had to watch Heat and Velocity and WCW Saturday night every week, so I love Dark. And I really appreciate, I am going to miss it. One of the little things that I will miss when the world goes back to normal is that I think that they have used Dark low-key very effectively as a booking tool, because it's not something that gets a lot of attention or needs a lot of attention, because especially lately, since the pandemic started, it's been just a lot of competitive squash matches. But and people complain about, well, why aren't you just focusing on a few storyline relevant matches? And it's not about that. This whole thing with all of these matches on Dark every week is about taking people who aren't getting bookings right now because independent promotions aren't running and giving them bookings. So that's what the purpose of all of these job matches on Dark have been about. And I think it's been, not only do you get some surprisingly great stuff. Ben Carter and Lee Johnson on Dark 3 or 4 weeks ago was so good, and you got Sonny Kiss against Christopher Daniels maybe 2 months ago. I was I didn't know Sonny Kiss could wrestle like that. That was before he wrestled Cody on Dynamite. But I just wanted to praise Dark a little bit. And the thing that's been using it effectively think about the Casino Battle Royal at All Out. It's Shawn Spears and the Butcher and the Blade and like all of these kind of guys who you would think of as they're not underneath guys, they're not job guys, but they're kind of middle guys that under normal circumstances I don't think that they would have had the really impressive artificially padded records that they have. Like Shawn Spears is something ridiculous like 13-2 in singles matches in 2020 because he wins on Dark every week. And I think that has been a really good thing as far as making the wins and losses feel like they mean something, was, using Dark as a device to stack up, all of these wins for your contracted talent.
If I could jump in on that for a second, I think that's why they need to do that extra promotion for Dark. Because when TH2 got a brush with greatness with FTR the other day, my mind was like, what? Didn't they just get back? Like, what? I was so confused about why they were in the ring with FTR. Well, as it turns out, they've been doing well on Dark. They earned themselves an opportunity. But I didn't know that based on anything that AEW told me, so maybe I do side with Eric a little bit. They didn't tell me that except on commentary, why they were even in the ring with FTR. And because Dark is not as well promoted, and I guess partially because it's not promoted, I'm not watching it, I didn't see the correlation there, and I did have to get it explained to me as to why they had earned that opportunity in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, even going into like that match wouldn't have made sense for them to take 30 seconds and show some footage from Dark of TH2 getting a bunch of victories and all that stuff. I mean, they could have easily started the entrance for TH2 and then just like, picture in pictured the them winning and all that fun stuff, and they could have made use of that time to build up that, okay, TH2 does deserve some sort of title shot. Darryl, you had something?
Yeah, so I'm going to say a name as sort of my exhibit A of AEW needs to do better at telling us who some of these new people are. Serena Deeb. I had no clue who she was when she had her match against Thunder Rosa. And I'm like, why is this match going longer than 3 minutes? Like, Thunder Rosa, the NWA Women's Champion, should just squash this person. This match, it's good, but it's going kind of long. She's going to get her ass kicked by Sheeta at the pay-per-view. And now, what is it, like, Serena Deeb's third or fourth match on Dynamite is when they wind up telling us she's one of the best female wrestlers in the world. Why didn't you tell me that the first time? Because I was really confused as far as why the NWA Women's Champion didn't put her away in, the same amount of time that Brody Lee destroyed and damn near killed Cody.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an ongoing thing where AEW expects everybody to know everything that's gone on in somebody's career outside of AEW before they get there. Of course, coming into AEW, most of us know because we were all watching New Japan, so we all know who Kenny Omega and the Bucks are, and what Cody had been doing for the past 2 years running up to AEW after he left WWE. And while we know, the vast majority of the audience does not, because there's roughly only 100,000 people who subscribe to New Japan World, and probably 20,000 if that are on Honor Club. So right there is the vast majority of a lot of these people who are coming in, and they don't know. And when you have almost 1 million people watching Dynamite, okay, you got 900,000. You got 90% of your audience do not know the history of these people, and it was not touched on. So even on the first date, they did not, and they still haven't really addressed, Kenny Omega's history outside of AEW, the Bucks' history outside of AEW, really anybody's history outside of AEW, more than a couple sentences here and there. Oh, he's really good. Okay, great. Well, why don't you tell us some more about what he has actually done?
And don't just tell us he's won titles all over the world.
Right, exactly.
Which that's the WWE thing of acknowledging that somebody, AJ Styles, is really good and worked in a lot of other promotions. Oh yeah, he's won titles all over the world.
Right, and not. Go ahead.
Well, one thing that I really liked, and I hope that they bring back, was Cody's open challenge for the TNT title, and then let the people come out. And I hated it when they would announce the week before, oh, next week it's going to be something. Like, how far in advance do I get to go to Tony Khan's office and say, I want to sign up for the open challenge? My thought is, or rather my thinking has always been, the wrestler says open challenge, and that's when it opens for that night. And then whoever's in Gorilla and has a buddy in the production booth, gets hit my music, and you get to go out and have the match. But when Eddie Kingston came out, I had heard the name before. I didn't know who he was, but he comes out and he starts, talking shit at Cody. It's okay, give us more of this in the open challenge instead of, oh, next week it's going to be Warhorse.
Right.
And then try to figure out who the hell is this guy?
Right. Before
as you said, is Indie-rific.
Yeah, before the match with Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks had a 30-second, 45-second video promo, and we suddenly know who he is. Same thing, Eddie Kingston cut the promo prior to his match. We know exactly who he is. Warhorse did not have that. Some others have not had that as well. But I think going back all the way to one of the people who was on this first episode of Dynamite, Riho. She had the entire time while she was the AEW Women's Champion, one video package about her, and that was it. She had no other video packages, and it's also a current problem with Hikaru Shida as well. They have done very little to build up Hikaru Shida, and I have no problem. I know both of them, English is not their first language. I am perfectly fine if you do pre-tapes, have them speak in Japanese and subtitle it. That is perfectly fine. Same thing with Pentagon and Phoenix. They've had some pre-tapes where Pentagon cut a promo in Spanish and they subtitled it afterwards, which is, I have no idea why they do not do that. Whereas, of course, we know in WWE, if you don't speak English, you're totally screwed. But AEW, I think they can take the high road, let their, just like every other combat sport, boxing, UFC, of course, in UFC, they have tons of non-English speaking competitors. They do these massive promo videos, 5-10 minutes leading up to a match. They have sit down interviews and they are speaking their native language. It's all subtitled and it is completely normal outside of wrestling. So I don't know why they are not doing it for AEW. Riho being a prime example, Hikaru Shida being a second, where they should just be doing promo packages in their native language, subtitle it, and let's get to know these people. Of course, I know Hikaru Shida because I follow her Twitter and she seems like a really fun person. So, I got that, but they don't pull any of that into AEW's product. Anybody have a comment on that?
I think you're highlighting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead,
Caleb.
I was just going to say, I think you're highlighting a even bigger problem with the AEW women's division as a whole. I think that they're not doing enough for some of these women, especially you mentioned Serena Deeb. I mean, I've been nothing but impressed with her on every single show. She's just an incredible technician. Thunder Rosa, I think they can do a lot more with some of these ladies. And not just do more in terms of storytelling and match time, I think, because the quality has improved, I will say. I think that from when we started to where we are now, the women's division, in terms of talent and skill, they are absolutely on the upward trajectory, but they're not getting more time like I think they should be. This is one area where I do like the idea of a faction. I know the Nightmare Collective we did away with, but let's get more women on TV, give them some more time. And I also think, to a previous point, AEW is expecting us, I think, to know a little bit too much. I know that some of these names we knew. We knew Cody, we knew the Bucks. Even people who might not have been diehard fans have at least heard of these people, but they've not heard of Thunder Rosa. And I think that's a shame because, one, she's great, but two, I think AEW needs to show you why we should care.
Dave.
Yeah, I agree with his statements on the women's division, and they do need to give them more, maybe not even so much screen time because it's a smaller division, but tout them a bit. Like, I didn't know anything about Hikaru Shida. I looked at her Instagram and I was like, oh, this chick rocks. She's funny. She's endearing. So they just throw her handle up there, not just Twitter, but like something where you can actually see like behind the scenes things about somebody's life. Is just throw Hikaru Shida's Instagram up there, Rihos. Like, not to mention, you guys know who the biggest Instagram following is?
No idea.
Dwayne Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Go figure.
Of course. Yeah. I was going to go with Minoru Suzuki because he is like an Instagram like addict, which is really funny. But yeah, I think this goes... So why don't we actually touch on the women's division since we're talking about it now? In the recent weeks, I think they have brought in some very good talent into the women's division. We have Serena Deeb, who was actually a trainer at WWE for many years now, so she knows exactly what she was doing. And when I knew who she was, so when she came out to face Thunder Rosa, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And it was a great match. It was really good. Both of them laid their stuff in, and it actually looks like their strikes hurt, whereas a lot of the competitors right now, we have the same person. We have Serena Deeb facing Big Swole this week, and Big Swole's strikes looked like nothing comparatively to Serena Deeb's strikes. So we've pulled in Serena Deeb. We finally have Eva Lise brought in. I thought she was going to be brought in way back at the beginning when she was in the first Battle Royale for the women's side last summer. And we have Diamante now. So those three are huge improvements over what was already in the division. And are we to the point now that AEW has started to bring on a lot of people and we might need to release some of the chaff at this point? Caleb.
Yeah, I know it's unfortunate to say, and I know now that, with the pandemic going on is a kind of a bad time to be releasing people, so probably should wait for a while for optics purposes. But I do think that we're starting to grow and to the point where, everyone sees a new free agent, right? Someone gets released from WWE. Someone has an open contract in New Japan. And someone goes, oh, well, AEW need them. And I'm sitting here thinking, AEW is kind of full. There are a lot of people on AEW that I haven't seen. I don't see Sean Spears a lot, right? Not that I'm saying he should be one of the releases, but I do think that there are people who are sitting back there, maybe not doing everything that they could be doing. And now it's time, as you said, you're bringing in some more talent. You really have to start to weigh your options and say, hey, we've got a lot of contracts here. We need to figure out who is going to be this roster moving forward, because they're only a year in, right? We're doing the show because it's only been 1 year. I think, first of all, that they've made huge growth in that year. But second of all, now you have to start saying, hey, what's our 5-year plan, right? We've done 1 year. We've got 4 more years of this contract, or maybe 3 more years with the television contract. I think it was a 4-year deal.
Three
You've
with
got
a
to figure out
fourth option, yes.
Right. So you've got to start to figure out, hey, who are my people, right? What is my roster, and who am I going to be realistically able to give either TV time to or AEW Dark time to? And if you can't see them in your plan, let's say even in the next year on either of those shows, it's time to start making some cuts.
Dave.
I think it's built up to the second official show, and they're just trying to pad their roster out because I think they're gonna go eventually get a second television show, and I think they're gonna maintain Dark as kind of the wrestling version of their being the elite. So I mean, it is full right now, and I'm hoping it's because of a second official show, and if it's not, they may have dug themselves into a little bit of a hole.
Darryl, what do you think?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that you just don't see. As Caleb said, like, when's the last time, other than standing at Gorilla and telling somebody good luck, when's the last time you saw Sean Spears on Dynamite? I really would like to see some of the people that wrestled exclusively on Dark get just brought up for one match in that open challenge for the TNT title. I also think that it should be sort of the television title rules, to where it gets defended on television every week instead of just, oh yeah, it's this secondary title and it gets defended when it gets defended. Like, make it the workhorse title, defend it every week. Let it change hands a little bit more often, but make sure that the rule is it gets defended every week in like an open challenge format. The women's roster, yeah, they've brought a lot of women in. I actually did watch all of the women's tag tournament that was all on YouTube. I totally forget to watch Dark. But I wish that they would give the women some more airtime instead of just having like the one women's match.
Yeah, from that tournament, I was actually really impressed with the team of Anna Jay and Tay Conti. They did a really good match. The first match they had was Nyla Rose and who was her who was her partner from
Cameron. Ariane Andrews.
Yeah. So
Cameron.
Yeah. Nyla Rose was pretty much in the match the whole time, but they told a really good story. The match was simple and it was not overly confusing. And I thought they did great because all they did was work over Nyla's legs to basically take the base out from under her. And I thought that's a very effective way to go, and you don't have to be the greatest competitor in the world. You don't have to do all types of flying stuff. I mean, we've seen, just for those who have been watching this year's G1, there have been plenty of matches that were grounded the whole time and were amazing matches. When we have a match like Minoru Suzuki and Ishii, all they did was punch and kick each other for 20 minutes, and it was awesome. It was not, they don't need all these flashy moves to get it over. You just need to be able to tell a nice story, and you don't have to be the greatest of the greatest, having all the tricks in your bag.
So going back to Anna Jay for a second, has anything moved forward with that storyline where Dark Order gave Tay Conti an envelope that said "Join Dark Order"
Not
on it?
that I know of.
Not really, but on Being the Elite, I think this week. So Tay Conti has been hanging out with the Jurassic Express, and then they showed the Dark Order coming in and Anna Jay harassing her about, why are you hanging out with these losers instead of us, on Being the Elite this week. We normally talk about Being the Elite on the AEW show, and we didn't this week. So.
Yeah, and that's something else that AEW expects people to, watch this YouTube show that started out as the Young Bucks basically doing a travel vlog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, this continues on back to the story conversation. Is there are stuff that happens on all this shoulder content that doesn't get brought up on Dynamite. They have, the Road to whatever show. So they have all these YouTube videos they put together. They have all these good sit down interviews and all this good stuff. And they don't even take 30 seconds of it to put on Dynamite. So you have a lot of this shoulder content. And then we have things like BTE, where some of it is canon and some of it is not, and you're not sure what's supposed to be canon and what isn't. Clearly, a lot of the Dark Order skits over the past 3 months are not canon, though they do lightly touch on it in Dynamite once in a while, just as an inside joke for those who actually pay attention. But
okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
Can is it too much to ask for them to take like 1-minute clips from some of these, shoulder contents and put it on their Twitter and their Facebook so that maybe somebody hopefully sees it?
Well, they do that.
In a sense, they do,
Okay.
right? They're expecting their fans to be on social media, to follow them on social media, see the clips, get the understanding, and then watch Dynamite with all of this already processed. Just to your point, it would be not hard to put it in picture or take a minute out of your airtime to show a little bit of context. And I think for someone who is a diehard fan and follows them on Twitter and watches BTE, things make sense. But we are not the real target audience here, right? They're looking for the disenfranchised wrestling fan. They're trying to bring them back in. They're trying to reach new viewers. And in some sense, I guess they're succeeding because, as you mentioned, I mean, the viewership numbers are doing, I think, pretty well for a program 1 year old. But I don't want to have to get on Twitter on Wednesday afternoon and find my, promo essentially for a match I'm going to see later. And Eric, I have to disagree a little bit. They put lawnmowers on stage with the Dark Order at one point. And Jim Ross, which was, mind you, a callback right back to BTE. And Jim Ross said, "Why are there lawnmowers?" He had no clue what was going on. And you literally had to have seen that Monday's BTE episode to understand that reference. I think that's a little... I don't like that.
Yeah, that's like a heavy-handed inside joke right there. Sometimes there's just the little ones of anything John Silver does kind of in the background. We have those, but that was a super heavy-handed one. And then going back to stuff being on social media, we have the original Joey Janela Sunny Kiss video package. That was originally on Twitter and was amazing. That was probably one of my favorite video packages that they've done. But when they put it on Dynamite, one, they cut like 60 seconds out of it, which was like some of the most entertaining 60 seconds of the video package as well. But yeah, they have this stuff, and I don't even know if they would have even put it on there if it wasn't for how good that video package was. But yeah, going back to Darryl, no, it's not. It shouldn't be too hard to put a 1-minute clip from BTE if it makes sense for the story, so we can get the context of what's going on. They could do this at the top of the show, do some sort of recap, of this, and this happened on Dark or BTE, or prior to the show going on air, this happened. I mean, that's kind of a basic thing on every other TV show. If you're watching, it's going to be a dated reference at this point, but if you're watching 24, they're going to, before the show starts, they say previously on and do a 2-minute thing to bring you up to speed. I don't know why AEW either doesn't do that after the first match or before the show even starts, so everybody is up to speed. Intro? Right, exactly. I mean, that's kind of how it goes. Okay, and everything that they show should lead into covering what's going to happen on the show, so you are up to speed, and then when you see something happen on the show, you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about at the beginning of the show.
But I'm thinking, instead of like the SNL cold open, you just start with sort of like a 2-minute recap of here's all the stuff that happened in the last week.
Right, exactly. Because stuff happens between when Dynamite went off the air and Dynamite goes back on the air the following week. So you can pick up that stuff and even touch on if something has happened 4 months ago, because we forget of this happened and it's going to play into the story coming up. They know, I mean, this is all predetermined. We know what's going to be coming up on the show storyline wise. There's no reason we can't recap it and bring you up to speed so you don't feel completely lost when stuff happens. Obviously, it is a reward for everybody for the people who watch everything, but you want to bring people up to speed who have maybe missed the last 2 weeks because they're on vacation or something. And I mean, not everybody is watching every single episode when it airs, like most of us are, because we are crazy.
Eric, you're old enough, and I know that you were watching wrestling back during the Attitude Era. So like even then, WWE and WCW were giving you recaps of here's what happened last week on Nitro or Raw.
Right.
So they weren't necessarily expecting everybody to remember what happened on their own show.
Mm-hmm.
So,
if
like,
I can point out though, I have to say, just as a small point, to be fair to AEW, they are doing this better than almost anybody else. Those subtle moments and those small things, they are honoring your attention. If you give them your 2 hours every week and you watch the show and you pay attention, there are callbacks, there are small little details in matches and booking decisions, and you watch this, and if you spent your 2 hours for the last 3 months, then when that pay-per-view comes around, you're going to notice little things, you're going to see something here and there, and you're going to appreciate it more. So you're right. They should, for the obvious stuff, I think, put it out there and really give you the context that you need. But they do honor your time. I appreciate that because I watch other products and I go, hey, no. I watched this show 2 weeks ago. I know that they're not a tag team anymore. Why are you trying to put them in a title match? But AEW, I think very well, especially, I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is obviously the Hangman, Kenny Omega, and the Bucks storyline, which culminated at Revolution. That match was, I mean, I know, we all know, it's been said, match of the year, blah, blah, blah. But just the little subtleties, the possible turns, even the moves that were used in the match. I mean, the Golden Lovers finisher from the Bucks, the chicken wing from Hangman Page. Those are things that as a viewer who does care and does give his time to this product makes me feel really happy inside because I know they care about me. And they know that if I watch, they're going to give me a little something.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. But of course, bringing in new viewers, it's hard to, if something happened 3 months ago and you have only started watching 3 weeks ago, well, then you're going to have a problem connecting some of these dots if they never recap anything that's happened more than 20 minutes ago, you know? So it's always it seems to be a problem of them recapping everything that has happened. Dave, you want to touch on any of this before we move on?
No, I completely agree with Caleb on that one. It's, for me, like, I don't have the time to watch all the supplementary information. Yeah. Just with everything, I have so much going on already.
All right, so let's move on to, let's talk about the title situations. We'll start with the tag titles. They started off with a tournament to crown the first tag team champions, who ended up being SCU, Frankie Kazarian, and Scorpio Sky. And then the next title, the switch to Kenny Omega and Hangman Page on the Jericho Cruise. And then a few weeks ago, FTR took them off of Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. How do you think they have been treating the tag titles so far in the existence of AEW? Caleb, why don't you start off with this one?
Well, I think it's no secret, obviously, that the tag division of AEW is probably one of their greatest strengths. For everything we said about the women's division, let's flip it and reverse it and play it for AEW tag teams, because this is one of their biggest strengths. I think even before the addition of FTR, I think this was one of the greatest tag divisions in any company. And I think that they've done a really good job, I would say, with the booking of the division. I think that the titles have had a good length. You know, I was a little surprised with the SCU decision as the inaugural champions, but I also appreciate that a lot of people had the fear that when AEW began, a lot of these titles were going to get put on a lot of these EVPs, like the Bucks, Cody, Omega. And I think they did a good job at establishing and maybe even rewarding a little bit some of those folks like SCU who had been with them since the Ring of Honor days, but since then have made a good progression. You know, now the titles are with FTR, and I think that's a really good place for them for the long term, for at least a little while. My one complaint, not just about the tag titles, but any titles, and I know this might sound contradictory, but I think that not every title needs to have months and months and months long reigns. I think the TNT title can change hands a little bit more. The tag titles, maybe a little bit more so. I think it's odd that we're a year into this show and we've had 3 tag team champions, and one of them only within the last month or two, I believe, with FTR. So I wouldn't even mind seeing it change hands a little bit more often. I think the world title needs to continue to be protected. But in terms of tag titles, I would like to see more teams, because they're not doing any of these video packages we talked about. A few of these teams can have a run, even if it's for a month or two. The titles change hands on TV and allow them to show a little bit more of their personality, because there are teams in this division that absolutely, I think, deserve, from a fan's perspective, I think that they deserve a run and could do very well to show us a little bit more about what they're about.
Yeah, I mean, the tag team division is ridiculously deep in AEW, of established tag teams, not just tag teams thrown together. Those, ironically, the second champions, Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, were not an established tag team compared to everybody else. But there are at least 15 regular established tag teams in AEW, probably more, as well as some trios. We might talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, their division is deep, though I would have to disagree on changing the tag titles too often. Really, since we're only a year in and we've had 3 changes, we had SoCal Uncensored, they had it for 83 days. Kenny Omega and Adam Page had it for 228, and FTR sitting at 34 days currently. So even at 228 days, not a excessively long title reign, I wouldn't say. I'd say it's a pretty decent one, on the longer end of what we normally see. But if you're looking out on other promotions outside of WWE, you tend to have these reigns last a bit longer, and this actually might be kind of a median range for the 228. Dave?
I'd agree with that one, and it was good. I think it's cool to start with SCU because they're an established team, and it brings a lot of legitimacy to the title, especially at the tail end of a tournament like that. And then and it was cool to see Hangman and Kenny gone there, because it's going to sell something much longer term. But at the same time, you can send in like your private parties and your Jurassic Expresses to have a match against them for the title and still look incredible in defeat. It's not some 2-minute squash match. It can go 15, 20, 25 minutes, and private party loses, but they still look absolutely awesome in defeat. And then FTR, I mean, they've been fantastic throughout, and the biggest shame for FTR is that they didn't get to have a live crowd for their debut, and I think it's a shame.
Yeah, and unfortunately on Wiki, they don't show how many defenses they had during their title reign as well. So that's another thing that you can take to other promotions where they are not having title matches every week. They might defend the titles once a month, if that, which you look at, say, in New Japan, and they might have roughly 10 tag team title matches in a year, compared to WWE that does one every other week sometimes. Trae?
So SCU had 3 title defenses. Omega and Hangman had 9, and FTR have had 2 so far.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, that's not even that bad. 9 title defenses over the course of 228 days, which is almost 7.5 months, somewhere around that. So yeah, that's not too bad. That's one in a 0.2 every month or so. So not bad.
The titles were on ice for like a 6-week period early in the pandemic when Paige wasn't able to make the Atlanta tapings too.
Yeah. So
they are defending every 3.5 weeks.
Yeah. So that's not too bad. That's not a super crazy number of defenses in a title reign. Anybody else want to touch on the tag titles?
Okay, maybe I should just clarify my stance a little bit. I don't want to say that they should change hands, every other week for sure. I think in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, what ways can we show a little bit more of some of the tag teams on the roster, right? And because we talked about the lack of video packages, right now the titles in my head are one of the few ways that we can really elevate and show what some of these tag teams are about and give them time, because if they're champions, then we can have like a Brush with Greatness, for instance, or we can have 9 title defenses like Hangman Page and Omega, which I think was one of the hallmarks of their reigns. And I do think, to be fair, counter to my own original point, having that many defenses and keeping them for longer does legitimize the titles a bit more. We know the tag team titles in WWE have been treated like trash for a while, exactly because they are switching so often. But as I said, I make my original point because I think that it's one of the few ways that they can put a bigger stage to some of the amazing tag teams they have, like the Jurassic Express and like the Lucha Bros. I think that they need more of a mainstream platform, and I think the titles are the way to do it.
Do you think adding in more tournaments throughout the year would alleviate some of this, to be able to showcase either singles and put some matches together that don't need a storyline to make them happen, where you put a tournament together, either do a round robin for a slightly longer tournament or do brackets like they have been. I think some round robins would be nice if they do them maybe once a year for the tag titles, and maybe do a round robin once a year to get a title shot at the world title. I think that would be great. You can fill up quite a few weeks of television doing that as well, and kind of build in these story marks in your year to kind of give your year some structure. And then you don't have to rely as much on coming up with some blood feuds or anything like that to get these things rolling. And of course, within these tournaments, you can create those blood feuds as well. Darryl.
Yeah, so definitely more tournaments. I do like the round robin style of like the G1. The only sort of downside of the way New Japan does theirs is, all right, we're having 16 shows in the next week and a half or whatever it is.
No.
And then we go 3 months without a show. And now we're having a whole bunch of shows in a really short period of time again. But if you did one of these round robin tournaments, and let's say that it's 2 brackets, or I think you could even 2 blocks, A block, B block. I think you could make the blocks a little smaller, do 4 blocks, and then do tournament style of the final 4, which would be sort of a twist between the G1 style plus just straight up tournament. But do a mix of some of the matches on Dark, some of the matches on Dynamite, and then we could get to see a Peter Avalon on Dynamite as something other than cannon fodder for whoever gets thrown over the barricade into the audience during a street fight sort of match.
Yeah, that could be a really good use of Dark, is to get some of those tournament matches done so they don't have to be on Dynamite every week, and you can have a larger block, and you could do a round robin when you put 3 of the matches over on Dark and have 2 on Dynamite, and then you can continue it on, and using Dark as that carrier for that. And if they get the 3rd show as well, then you have more time to fill up. And this is much more, doing a tournament is a much better quote unquote time fill than just putting in random stuff for the sake of filling time. Whereas you have a purpose to the matches to fill the time.
If you do 3 tournaments a year, so have a men's heavyweight, world title tournament, let's call it the E1, the women's, and then the tag. So that's 3 tournaments. And then, use the time between whatever, or between double or nothing and All Out as sort of that time of year where you don't have a tournament and you just sort of let, feuds come to a head or start to build for the coming year. And then, you can wind up, we've got this upcoming tournament for the heavyweight thing anyway. And they're already sort of building that Hangman Omega feud. Let that sort of come to a head during the tournament.
Trae. No? Dave.
Nah, I do like the idea of a tournament. Tournament will breed competition. I even do with my own guys. Being in the military, I could have up to 50 people under me at a time. A month prior, before I do a competition, I'm going to hype the hell out of it. So when the morning of that competition comes, each squad is just all cracked out on competition, and they're going to perform like absolute monsters, and it just builds up to it. So if you do one annual type of tournament per year, then you say, hey, it's springtime. Now it's time for X tournament. Everyone's going to be tuning in.
Yeah, and touching back onto what Darryl was just talking about, using that time between Double or Nothing and All Out to build up to All Out, have All Out be your marquee blow off end of the year biggest show each year. And one thing that I wish they did, but they did not do, was that the winner of they did the ladder match this year for the big old poker chip that Brian Cage won. I kind of hope they do the ladder match again. And I wish what they did was the winner of that match gets the title shot at All Out, and then treat that as, say, the G1 briefcase, where you might have to defend it a couple times before going into All Out. No, Darryl disagree with that one.
Yeah, I want the poker chip to be like the Money in the Bank briefcase, to where you get to cash that poker chip in whenever you want to, instead of like who Brian Cage won the poker chip and was like, I'm cashing it, or I've got my match at fill in the blank thing.
Okay, so with the poker chip, do you have to give at least some advance notice? You can't just sweep in at the end of the match and take the title, because that's so WWE that I think that's what people do not want to happen.
I would say the notice should be no later than a certain point within the show.
Interesting. Okay.
So like you can announce opening segment of the show. You just come out with the microphone and say, at some point tonight, I'm cashing this in. And then you could even build to some backstage things to where we're trying to locate the champ because we don't know where he is, and he's trying to prevent the cash in.
I think we're having some disagreements here, Caleb.
All right, so I know that I've probably been the one in this call so far to, trash on WWE the most. But one thing that they have gotten right is Money in the Bank. That thing works. It's a good match generally, and it's a great device, because a face can come out and say, next Monday, you're on, guy, and I'm cashing this in. But a heel, like Seth Rollins, can come out halfway through a match when someone's just beaten and bloody, hit him with a curb stomp, and win. I think that the way that works right now is perfect. I don't necessarily know if AEW needs the same device, because it's going to be seen as a little bit of a ripoff. As a side note, why does it have to be a poker chip? I understand the casino, but that was kind of initially, I think, from All In. I would like to see them go away with the whole gambling / poker motif in general. It
was supposed to be in Vegas.
I understand that, but I just think that they've stuck with that for a little while now, and I feel like they could use a different theme. Anyways, I do think that Money in the Bank, as it works right now for WWE, is perfect. If they want to do something like that, I won't hold it against them, but I do think it would be seen as a little bit of a ripoff. In terms of the tournament, I think that's a great idea. I do think that they need an annual G1, so to speak, and I don't think that the casual fan will see it as a ripoff, because the casual fan is probably not subscribed to New Japan World and watching 17 nights worth of the G1 in 2 weeks. But I do think that would build hype. It would fill a good section of your year, let's say a month worth of TV time dedicated to a tournament. And I think that would, but I think 3 tournaments is a little much. I have to say, I think that eats up too much TV time, and that what they're doing week to week in slow-term story building, I think is really great. But having that one tournament, like a Best of the Super Juniors, or, I mean, in my opinion, if they are going to do that one, it should be a tag team tournament, and it should be round robin. It should be 1 month, and they should build the crap out of that.
All right, let's go to Trae first, and then we'll come back to Darryl.
What was the question?
Oh, all right. On the poker chip Money in the Bank stipulation, whatever you want.
No, I just want people to have to defend the shitty poker chip. It's like the only thing that's worse than Kenta's shitty red briefcase. I think that the Money in the Bank is a WWE gimmick, and AEW doesn't need to replicate it. But I do like the idea of a tournament, and I think that you want to do a singles men's tournament. You don't want to call it the A1. Come on, and
I said E1.
E1. I heard A1.
The elite one.
Okay, E for elite. E1.
Okay, that
elite.
makes. I heard
elite
A. I heard A1.
No,
that
not
makes a lot.
steak sauce.
That makes a lot. That makes a lot.
JR's barbecue sauce.
Annual All Elite Tag Team Wrestling Tournament. Too much of a mouthful?
Yeah, do the JR's barbecue sauce climax and the main event mustard tag league. Oh,
I
yeah.
just had a bad mental image when you said JR barbecue sauce climax.
I'd buy that.
Dave, you want to come in on any of this?
Yeah, let me come in hot on JR's special sauce. No, I do agree and disagree with a lot of those points. I don't think they should rip things off of WWE, but Money in the Bank is such an absolute money maker. For me,
is he breaking up for just
I'm
me or
okay
is
with
it
the
everybody?
poker chip because it's a WrestleMania.
There we go.
And there was like 6 main eventers who just didn't have anything to do, so they bought up that Money in the Bank idea. If the AEW can make it their own, that's fine too, because you look at every other promotion, they've ripped off the Royal Rumble in some manner, but they've also made it their own. But it's also wrestling. You can only have X amount of ideas before you... There's only so much you can do. So I would say take a Money in the Bank, kind of adjust it a little bit. Maybe you can change the stipulation every year and how you cash in until they find something that works. But I'm okay with the poker chip cash-in idea.
All right, Daryl.
New Japan has 6 tournaments a year.
Yes.
So I think AEW doing 3 a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, one in the winter, is not too much. Especially if you have one as winner gets a world title shot, one is for the women's world title, and one is tag team.
Okay, but New Japan is not running a weekly TV, right? So the weekly TV is AEW's time to build any other story that they want to build. New Japan can do something like, hey, we've got a streaming service, sign up and watch a month's worth of wrestling.
That's why I'm saying
watch that in America.
Have some of the matches on your Dark. And then what they did with the women tag thing, where it was all on YouTube. There's a way that they can do it without eating up too much of the Dynamite airtime. But especially if they get that third hour on like a different show, they're going to need something to fill in, and then give the guys that are currently fighting on Dark. Pineapple Pete and Bahama Joe or whoever the hell they are that I see scrolling across the bottom, and I'm like, never heard of this guy. I've heard of this guy. He beat somebody that I've never heard of. What's the point of this match?
Trey, go.
Back to the... Oh, sorry. Go, Trey.
Megabyte Ronnie was the one that I was trying to remember. I had a train of thought that I was following that I lost. I'm sorry, I have severe ADHD, and I just if I'm waiting for my turn to talk and it takes too long, sometimes I just lose it. But I had something very compelling that I was going to respond to what you were saying there. That's just gone forever now.
All right, Caleb.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it kind of comes back to the topic of roster depth, right? Like, if they have a third show, right? Let's say 1 hour on another night, on Friday night, and an hour of Dark on YouTube, then yeah, I think maybe more tournaments. But I'm thinking right now we've got one show and Dark, which is not necessarily promoted. I think, like I said, I will agree to disagree because I think that 3 tournaments are too much. But at the same time, like, if we do this tournament, on that third show, who are we going to watch? Billy Gunn and like Glacier and like, I don't know, they're going to bring in all these guys. I don't want to see them. I'm not going to take the time to watch that because we're starting to get, down here on that roster. So, and again, to the point about the poker chip and ripping off of WWE, yeah, they have ripped off of the Royal Rumble and it sucks. I'm not a huge fan of the Casino Battle Royal. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think it's as effective as a Royal Rumble. And that was them trying to put their own twist on something WWE. So I don't want to see what their version of a Money in the Bank is, because the only way that it works, I think, is exactly what it is right now in WWE. They have to follow those rules. Otherwise, it's going to be seen as just, the Rocket Cola of the Money in the Bank.
All right, Daryl, last one and we'll move on.
Yeah, can we just all agree that nobody should ever rip off TNA's Reverse Battle Royal?
Yes.
I think we can agree on that one.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the Women's Championship. We first had Riho holding it for 133 days, went to Nyla Rose for 101 days, and Hikaru Shida is now holding it for 140 days so far. What do we think about their choices and how they've gone about building these characters? I think we've already talked about Riho and Hikaru Shida about not getting really any promo packages or any insight into who they are beyond what we've seen in the ring, and one maybe little 10-second thing with Hikaru Shida backstage once in a while, and Riho having the one video package. Dave.
I really agree with that, and I think their choices are great. I think they're all great competitors and great performers, and it's just that the beginning of Dynamite getting to TV, their depth was very shallow when it comes to the amount of performers they had. And I think a lot of it was reliant on the Joshi division from Japan. So once coronavirus hit, you just cut that in half. You lost Emi Sakura, Riho, Yuka Sakazaki, which I was a huge fan of right off the bat. The only reason they have Hikaru Shida right now is because she moved to Florida. She literally, picked up her whole life and moved to Florida. And I just came back from Japan myself, so I was absolutely amped to see Riho, Yuka, Hikaru Shida, and all that. And then they've kind of dropped the ball, but it's not completely their fault due to a lack of depth. And if you look at WWE, they've had an actual women's division since 2015, 2016, so they've had 4 or 5 years to build on it. These guys are building off of minimal.
Yeah, and we're not even just the Joshi wrestlers. We have missing Jamie Hayter and B. Priestley because they're both from the UK, so they haven't been able to come in either. B's been released subsequently, though. But yeah, so we're missing both Joshi. We did have a lot of international talent that haven't been able to come back as well. So there's 5 right there that we didn't get because of international. We lost for a while Britt Baker, but she has probably been doing her best work on character development while she's been injured. And we're also now missing Chris Statlander as well from ACL, and she's probably not going to be back till next summer. So yeah, it's gonna be a while before they come back, and now that we're starting to build, I think the 3 champions that we've had were the right call. I was surprised Hikaru Shida took the title off of Nyla Rose so quickly. She only had it for 101 days. That was a bit of an upset. I'm not sure if there was any reasoning behind taking the title off of Nyla so quickly. And she has not worked her way. Actually, Nyla Rose has not had really any matches in the past 3-4 months either. Maybe a couple, but no serious program. So that might be something to address too. Trae.
The women's division is the worst booked part of AEW, but at least it's better than it was a year ago, I think. Riho did not work for me. I was a bigger fan of Nyla Rose. I just thought that her whole path to the championship with her could have been done so much better. It could have been made to mean something. Like, it just feels like it feels like that's barely even a part of this history because it was such a Nyla's title reign was such a non-entity. Like, she won the title, she had one very disappointing match with Chris Statlander on a pay-per-view, and then she was gone because of the pandemic, and then she lost it to Hikaru Shida. Now, Shida, I do think, has had the best reign, and I think that, and I was actually just looking at this yesterday, she's only defended the title twice since May, which seems like a pretty lean championship schedule, but she is defending the title next week, and I don't think that she's going to lose the title to Big Swole. But I think the things have looked up, especially since they started the thing a few months ago where Shida kind of issued the challenge to outside women to come in, and that's how we ended up with Ivelisse and Diamante and Thunder Rosa and even Serena Deeb all coming into AEW. So yeah, I think that the booking of the women's division is still the weakest thing going in AEW, but I think it has improved.
That match she had with Penelope Ford was excellent. That was a really good title match in the women's division. Probably the best one, best title match for AEW's title that they've had.
And as long as we're talking about the women's division, I just want to say Penelope Ford, a legitimate contender for most improved in 2020. Like, she has come so far as a wrestler this year.
And I think if Dustin was with us as well, he would give her a lot of praise too, because I think he's been on shows with her before as well when she was on the Indies. Caleb, you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, to be honest, as we sat here and discussed, I started trying to gather some of my thoughts on the women's division and realized I don't have a lot. And I don't think, please forgive me, but I hope that's not my fault. I feel like AEW is just not giving me a ton to work with and to chew on here when it comes to the women's division. I do think that Shida is the best champion so far. I have, been pretty invested, I'd say, in her title reign. But they're still not giving me as much as like her Instagram, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, they could do a lot more to showcase just how entertaining and charismatic I think she really is. The match with Penelope Ford, by the way, totally agreed. The best women's, possibly one of the best women's matches in AEW since they've started, in my opinion. I think they've been great. And I'm supportive of the Joshi thing. I think that's a great idea to try to introduce those women to a bigger audience. But I just don't think that there's a lot for me to really chew on. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, who's going to be the next champion? And not only can I not really think of who the next champ should be, there's no one I'm really pushing for or advocating for because I just don't know enough about the women. My personal opinion, and I think Eric, you and I have disagreed on this before, I think that Thunder Rosa should have taken the championship. They should have done a series of 3 matches. Eventually, she should have won the championship. I think Shida should have challenged for both belts, won both belts to start a little bit more of that talent share, taking both the AEW and NWA championships back with her. And then finally, split the titles once again. And Thunder Rosa, if she was just on a limited share, could have just taken the NWA championship back. But I just don't. I wish I had more to say about the women's division. And like I said, I hope that's not my fault. I just don't know who the next champ should be. Actually, I take that back. It should be Britt Baker. It should 100% be Britt Baker. It probably should have been Britt Baker from the start. But one thing that disappoints me a little is when I think about All In, the 4-way that they had between Britt Baker, Chelsea Green, I think it was Tessa Blanchard, and I don't remember who the 4th woman in that match was. I had a lot higher hopes for their women's division, and I'm glad that they're starting to bring in outside women like Ivelisse, Diamante, like we were talking about earlier. I think that's the right move, but I feel like they're just a step behind the rest of the company.
And Darryl, I'll give you the last word before we move on to the next title.
Yeah, Britt Baker should totally be the next champ. And I'll go ahead and give a prediction for 1 year from today. Either Penelope or Anna Jay will have the title.
Interesting. All right. Let's move over to the TNT Championship. It's actually the newest of the titles, only established back in March. Started off with a 3 3-round tournament with Cody Rhodes, Shawn Spears, Sammy Guevara, Darby Allin, Dustin Rhodes, Kip Sabian, Colt Cabana, Lance Archer. This was all up in the air, came down to Lance Archer and Cody in the end. I think that was kind of where people thought it was going. It could have been Darby and Lance Archer. I think that was also another possibility people were talking about as well. So we have Cody holding on to it for a while and losing it to Brody Lee in basically a 3-minute squash after he had defended the title numerous times week after week. And I think the story came down to he was just exhausted at that point. Brody Lee held the title for TV world for 46 days. It was legitimately 55 days because they taped it was on tape delay. And now Cody got it back just this past week. And I think we've talked about that this should probably be the workhorse title. I think it was Darryl who said it should be defended every single week. I would be fine if they bumped it to every other week, just so they don't have to take up a match every single week for the television title. I think every 14 days would be fine. Cody looks like he wants to bring back the weekly challenge because he's already challenging somebody, and it ends up being Orange Cassidy this coming week, and we'll see how that goes. But how do we feel about how they are presenting the title? And one thing that I kind of wish happened is with a TV title, basically this is what it is. It should only be defended on TV, no pay-per-view matches. That's what I always hated about TV titles. It's like, well, if it's a TV title, why are you defending it on a pay-per-view? That's not television. Trae.
I don't have a problem with the championship being defended on pay-per-view, but it irritated me that the first TNT champion was not crowned on TNT.
Right?
Yeah.
Dave.
I completely agree with Trae on that one. It should have been on TV. It's in the title, TNT TV. But I don't mind Cody being the first one. I thought it was very cool to watch Brody dismantle Cody in literally 180 seconds. I do think it's very odd that Cody has won it back. But in my head, and I've been saying this for the entire time, I'm hoping it's long-term booking and not, whatever kind of narcissism. But I do agree with the every other week or so, maybe every week, depending on a certain circumstance and depending on the character who actually holds it. But I'm okay with what they're doing, but I'm fanboying for long-term booking because it's something that's been lost in American pro wrestling for 20 years plus.
Yeah, I mean, there's been arguments coming up. Should Orange Cassidy take the title off immediately? And AEW shows, okay, just because it's the first title defense doesn't mean they're necessarily going to win. I don't see it being a bad thing. And of course, we can argue about the Orange Cassidy. He beat Chris Jericho twice. And if he beat Chris Jericho twice and then he loses 2 TNT title matches, well, then did he actually get anywhere? It seems like they're trying to elevate Orange Cassidy versus, sending him back down to where he was. So I guess there's something there. Caleb.
I have to say that I think the TNT title belt, the championship, because the belt, jury's out, I think, still on the actual design and coloration. However, I think that this division, so to speak, as I guess we could call it, AEW's mid card, is my favorite part of the show right now. I really love the, weekly title defenses we had with Cody. To be 100% fair, I mean, Brody defended it too, right? It's not like the open challenge is only a Cody thing, but obviously he's made a point to talk about said open challenge. But I really do love this division. I love that this could be the area where people like Orange Cassidy, like perhaps a Scorpio Sky. We saw Cody defend the belt against him previously and during his first title reign. I think that this is where some of those stars can come to play, which is why I thought earlier when we discussed, hey, do we see all these people from the first show being world champion? Not world champion, but I do see Santana, for instance, right? I think he could hold the TNT title. I think that a lot of folks who you might not expect could challenge and potentially take it. I think that this is one of the areas where I do think the belt changing hands a little more often is a good thing. Maybe not immediately. I don't know if Orange Cassidy should win next week. Though, to your point, I think you're 100% right. He's already lost once. Maybe this is the time to pull the trigger with him for, the first time. And I almost see this kind of as the junior heavyweight belt to relate to New Japan. This is where, your Will Ospreay in New Japan can hold this belt. We might not see him as a heavyweight yet, but I see people coming into this belt. I don't see Orange Cassidy winning the World Championship, right? But I do see him winning the TNT Championship, and I think it's a good thing that even the possibility is in my mind. Because if Orange Cassidy went up against Jon Moxley for the belt, there's no doubt in my mind who's winning that match. But with the TNT Championship, there can be that little bit of doubt every week and say, hey, is Eddie Kingston the guy, right? Is Shawn Spears, is he going to be the guy to take it off of him? And there is that possibility of a title change.
Trae, it looked like you wanted to say something at the beginning of that.
Something about the open challenges. Oh yeah, so Brody's promo the week after he won the title was no more open challenges, no more opportunities for indie guys. He only defended twice. And it was against Dustin and against Orange, so both announced matches. So the open challenge is, Cody's gimmick. And I actually like that idea that, okay, I like the idea that this belt, and I don't think of it as like the junior heavyweight title, or even I don't necessarily think of it as like a TV title. I think of it more of the equivalent of the IWGP Intercontinental title, where it's separate, but not quite equal, but like almost. And it makes sense that it could be a different goal, that, there are practical reasons why you as a professional wrestler might be choosing to pursue the TNT Championship. Why God would you pursue the TNA Championship? There are reasons that you would pursue the TNT Championship over the AEW World Championship for this specific time. And I like the idea of, okay, Cody treats the TNT Championship differently than, Mr. Brody Lee does. And, Scorpio Sky might win it and treat it, a little differently still. Maybe somebody, wants to defend the title every week against, 1 week I'm going to import a wrestler from Japan, and then Mexico, and then Germany. These are good ideas. Somebody should hire me to be a booker somewhere. But,
do a world tour.
I like the TNT title, and I like the idea of different champions having different kinds of reigns, and I like the idea of this being Cody's belt, because Eric and I talked about this on the main AEW podcast. I liked this. I didn't have a problem with Mr. Brody being used kind of the way he was. I think that this was a story to take Cody off of TV for several weeks so he could go do the game show. And it's a classic pro wrestling redemption story. That it was the whole point of Mr. Brody winning the TNT title was for Cody to win it back. And that's just booking. But yeah. I'm a big fan of the TNT Championship. I'm a big fan of the belt too. I actually liked the crappy silver one just because it kind of looked like the old NWA TV belt that was kind of the red strap with the silver. But the finished belt with the gold, I think is a fair. I'm a belt nerd, and I think that's a beautiful belt.
All right, Darryl, I'll give you the last one before we move on to the World Championship.
So I think that Brody Lee would be able to be world champion if he could speak in a Southern accent. But I also am looking forward to, if they do wind up, allowing the wrestlers to treat the challenges differently on the TNT title, how weird and interesting will the matches be when Darby Allin winds up getting the belt? Because at some point he's gonna get the TNT title.
That's who I thought was gonna take it off Cody to be originally.
He's challenged for the world title. We knew he wasn't going to beat Jon Moxley, but he didn't give up. He still had the fight in him even after he was basically passed out. But are we going to have matches in a skate park? Do you have to jump off of a bridge into some water to wind up winning the title? But yeah, I really like the idea there. And I would love to see more of the guys on Dark come up to challenge instead of necessarily bringing people in from the indies for a one-off appearance.
Sure. I guess Caleb, I'll give you one. Oh man, we got some more talking about. All right, let's continue. Caleb wanted to say something.
Right.
Go for it.
Just one point. And I don't know if this is the direction the TNT title should go, but what you just said totally makes me think of one of the coolest concepts I've ever heard of, and I don't think it was very long-lived. But Progress Wrestling out in England, they had a belt at one time, I think it's retired now, called the Proteus Championship, and it was only defended under the champion set type of match structure. So if it was a big guy, then you had a big Haas match. If it was a guy who was, now, I don't want to bring up any disgraced names, but a deathmatch individual who was big in Progress, if he held the belt, then it was only contested under deathmatch rules. I love the idea of this. And of course, as we all have, as wrestling nerds, we've all flirted with the idea, what if I was booking a company? What if I was, in a place where I could book something like that? In my head, in Caleb's fictional, wrestling promotion, that championship exists because I think there's unlimited potential. And if they want to take the TNT championship that direction, I think that's awesome. Let's have a cinematic match in a big skate park. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Weapons are allowed as long as they're skateboards, right? Trash can lids. Let's go that direction. Don't make it every match, because we know Cody's going to have his good old NWA style matches, right? And everyone's going to do their own style. But for a little bit, let's have that title that's defended under the way that the champion wants it defended. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, it could be an interesting one. And since the TNT Championship has a 20-minute time limit, except for this previous match, coming into this Orange Cassidy match, we could be seeing our first time limit draw on the TNT title. That would probably be the better way to go than Orange Cassidy losing, or we get some sort of shenanigans finish, or we get a DQ. So which we haven't had since the 2 out of 3 falls match, and the time limit draw we haven't had since like the 3rd or 4th week of Dynamite when Jon Moxley and Pac were a team or facing each other, I think, if they had a time limit draw. So we haven't had either of those in almost a year now, so it would kind of make sense if maybe we finally hit a time limit draw on that match. So we will see. All right, let's move over to the AEW World title. We have only had 2 holders of the belt, that being Chris Jericho as the first one, defeating Hangman Page in the first match at All Out back in August, and then Jon Moxley took it off of him this February at Revolution. So been just 2, and I think both have been the right guys at the right time. It made a lot of sense to pull the trigger on Jon Moxley during his challenge, and I think Chris Jericho being the first champion was the correct choice, regardless of who was going to face him. Even if it was going to be Kenny Omega, who had originally beat Hangman Page to get that match, I think Chris Jericho was probably the right way to go. Give somebody with the biggest star power on your roster, give him the belt to start it off with. He held it for 6 months, 182 days. And Moxley is already sitting at 225. And I think he is shown why he is one of the best. His promos are amazing. Just this past week was probably one of the best promos we've seen in pro wrestling for quite some time, and it was a whopping minute 30, and just got in, got out, exactly what it needed to be. So what do we think about the trajectory of the AEW World Championship so far, now that we've had it in play since August 31st of 2019? Darryl, why don't you start us off this one?
So I would love to have seen Jericho's reign be a little shorter. I understand why they had him be the first champion. And then, like the long-term booking with sort of, the fall of Hangman Adam Page, where he sort of went into, like the drinking depression, sort of become a tag team wrestler thing. I'm really looking forward to what comes out of the tournament that's coming up. especially with, that at some point before he retires, Kenny Omega will hold that title. And Page is still young, so at some point in his career, he will hold the title. At some point in his career, unless something tragic happens, MJF will hold the title, probably numerous times. So like there's a lot of people on the roster that I could see holding the world title. It's just a matter of getting the title on them, or at the same time, you have to wonder, is AEW looking to do some of sort of the Vince McMahon 1980s style booking, where you have people that are always hovering around the upper title picture, but never actually get the title?
So you're
like back in
you're
the
Jake
80s.
Roberts and why am I totally spacing the $1 Million
Like
Man?
Roddy
Ted
Piper.
DiBiase, Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
None of them won the world title, but we know them as some of the best ever.
But they were always up in that title picture, but they didn't necessarily ever have the title. So looking at the reigns here, where both have been right at or past 6 months, they're already on the longer side of reigns. We don't need to go like Attitude Era and flip the title, 3 times in a week. That's ridiculous. But, it's one of those things of, what are the actual behind the scenes booking decisions? Do they want long champions, or do they want more people to be in that, championship tier? And by that, I mean holders of the belt.
Yeah, I think as far as defenses goes, we were talking about that they have not had a ton, and they don't happen very often. There is a mention way back when Brock Lesnar had the IWGP heavyweight title, and CM Punk had the WWE title. During the same time frame, CM Punk defended 160 times, where Brock Lesnar had 7 defenses. And I think AEW is definitely going the more New Japan route, where they have important matches.
In Brock Lesnar's defense, when he held the WWE or Universal title, I think he had a combined 7 title defenses over like 3 years.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different topic as well. So
he doesn't like to fight, but he likes to get paid.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I gotta say, I 100% agree with you, Eric. The way they've done the World Championship has been absolutely perfect. Starting with Jericho versus Omega. Omega lost, but he still looks like an absolute monster. And then that amazing debut of Jon Moxley.
It was Hangman and Omega.
Oh yeah, sorry. It was then it went to So, but either way, they both look great in it. And then I was thinking of Moxley debuts, then puts out Omega and Jericho at the same time.
Yep.
And that which eventually leads to Jon Moxley beating him in one of the coolest segments I ever thought there was, when he faked the eye injury. And then he pulls the patch up. He can see the whole time. And then he finishes off Jericho. And now he's been defending it since. I think it's absolutely perfect. 6 months was good for Jericho. Brings legitimacy to the title. Then they hand it over to an absolute monster like Moxley. And it was even, he's good. Because before the coronavirus hit, when they had the program with Mike Tyson even said, I would not want to be stuck in an alley with Jon Moxley. And that's from Iron Mike Tyson, who will punch your face off.
Trey, what do you think about the world title so far?
Spoken about how much I love Jon Moxley and his world championship reign. Jericho, you had to do Jericho first. I think everybody knew, everybody expected. I actually, if I was booking, I probably would have made the call to put the belt on Cody last November. But seeing the way that things worked out with Mox, and I've loved his title reign. I love that, every match, every opponent is different. He has a kind of different match. He wins in different ways. I gushed about him on our podcast the other night, just how much I love Jon Moxley, that I think he's just the modern day Terry Funk. He's that perfect blend of just wrestling acumen and crazy violence and charisma that, is somebody that I can really get behind as, like, it's the first guy that I've really felt like since I was a teenager that I had the wrestler that I could look at and go, yeah, that's my guy.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated #1, as Dave said in the chat. Caleb, you want to finish off the world title discussion here?
Sure. Speaking, strictly from this point backwards, because I think we'll talk a little bit about the future of that scene in a minute. But honestly, I think I'm pretty much in agreement. I think they booked it pretty much exactly like I would have thought. I think Jericho was the correct choice, #1. I think that there's always money in the babyface chase, right? So I think not giving it to Hangman right off the bat, I think is 100% the right call. I think Jericho really brought a lot of legitimacy. And in fact, his title reign has generated probably some of my favorite moments from this past year of Dynamite. There's one segment that pops into my brain where he was listing the individuals whilst he was feuding with Jon Moxley, individuals that he would not defend the title against. And every third name was Jon Moxley. And then he would say, Alan Jones, Vinnie Jones, the Young Bucks, Moxley. That is probably one of my favorite segments from AEW this past year. But I think the decision to put it on Moxley when they did was correct. All of Moxley's title defenses, in my opinion, at worst have been good and at best have been very, excellent in my opinion. I think Moxley, we're even seeing him, even though he's kind of like that top tier, top of the card guy, we're even seeing his development and growth a little bit. Some of the moves and submissions that he's using, you're really seeing a lot of growth from him. And I think that they've basically booked it exactly the way I think they should have. I think that both Jericho and Moxley have been absolute top tier. You know that they are the guy, and they carry themselves like the guy. I can't agree more with you guys that I think that they're two champions in a year. It has been the perfect decision, and I think both Jericho and Moxley have had a, both equal in my mind. Elevated to that very top level. And I would say also as a point that their feud against each other, which I think we're kind of leaving out, we're thinking, here's Jericho and here's Moxley. When they were feuding, I loved that material as well. I think Moxley, pretending to join the inner circle before delivering my favorite line of this past year where he said, "You know what, Chris? I don't want to join your group. It's a stupid group." Them with the bit of the bubbly. I think that was one of my favorite moments this past year. So they had a great feud. Moxley winning was the right call, and it brings us to now, where I think both guys are just absolutely proven themselves to be top tier competitors.
Yeah, I mean, the feud with Jericho and Moxley, there was the weigh-in where Jericho got bloody hard way, which just made for such a great visual. It was a complete accident, but it was one of the happiest accidents. Actually, there's been so many happy accident hard ways in AEW. It's insane. Cody getting gashed open in his match against Jericho, going face first into the stage. We have Jericho during the weigh-in. We have Britt Baker during her match with Hikaru Shida when she got her nose broken. That elevated her so much, and I believe there was another recent one that we had a hard way that
Sammy
was
Guevara and Matt Hardy with
there
the
you
chair.
go. Yeah.
And if I can throw a point in there, I heard, rumblings, Dave Meltzer, PWI, whatever, that backstage there was some heat with Sammy over that, but that was the happiest accident that could have happened for that feud. I know that the match and the Matt Hardy injury was dicey, but in that moment, that opening up and the visual of the mask of blood and the shirt that said "I don't die in blood," that was the greatest thing that happened for Sammy and for Matt in that moment. And even if there was heat with him backstage over opening Matt like that, which I understand, irresponsible maybe in the moment, boy, did it make that feud, 100 times more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that feud is cursed because every single time those two met, somebody ended up hurt.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah. And talking about Moxley growing as a competitor, adding more tools to his toolbox, now that he's not on the road 300 days a year and wrestling 260 matches in a year, he's back at home and he lives in Las Vegas, and he trains with Randy Couture, which obviously one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. So no wonder he's starting to pull in some of the MMA stuff. He's beaten people with the rear naked choke, with a triangle choke. He's used the pull dog choke. So he's started to pull that stuff in, an arm bar as well. Then Taz threw in the towel, right, when he was submitting Brian Cage with an armbar. So he's used a lot of submissions, and I think that has definitely stepped him up on being extremely dangerous as well, and just growing that character. That okay, he's a lot of guys have one maybe impact finisher and one submission. And he has now the Death Rider or the paradigm shift, whatever you want to call it. But now he has so many submissions that he doesn't seem to go to the well to over and over again. Now he's just going to hit you out of nowhere. He can hit the paradigm shift, throw on a submission if you kick out of it, and continue and submit you that way. So he's definitely grown. Before we head to the favorite AEW moments in the past year, does anybody have a topic that they want to discuss?
What happened to all of the mimosa that was used during the Mimosa Mayhem challenge?
The inner circle drank it.
Due to coronavirus restrictions.
What was that?
Drink it.
Water. Was that just water with some orange food coloring?
That's what I'm guessing. Any other topics we want to cover?
Oh, yeah. Here's something. I know that it's been discussed on your podcast about, when the crowds do come back, they can't do some of the stuff that they're currently doing because, they've got wrestlers in, the ringside area. What if they kept the wrestlers in that ringside area and then had the audience sitting further up, kind of like how at New Japan they have this big huge giant area between the ringside and then where the audience starts?
Double barricade, basically.
Yeah,
how they have it now.
That way they can do the stuff of throw somebody over the barricade, knock somebody out of a chair or whatever. Plus, it gives Billy Gunn something to do on a Wednesday instead of, whatever it is he was doing beforehand because he wasn't actually on the show.
Hey, he was getting MJF promos cut on him, and I like him in that role because MJF can scathe him every week, and I will eat it up.
He works 10 matches with his son on Dark damn near every week.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a very strange thing that happened in the coming into the first year of AEW. 6 months into AEW existing, the whole world shuts down, and now we have all these problems where we can't have crowds. They really only went that 1 week without realizing, oh, wait a minute, why don't we just throw our wrestlers and start making some noise? They took the cue from, I believe he said it was from either Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon's show, where they had crew making the noise in the audience, and that's how Tony Khan decided to put wrestlers out there. So obviously there's been a lot of shifting that they've had to do, a lot of on the fly stuff. They had that Georgia taping that they basically did 26 matches in the course of 2 days or something like that on Unrestricted. Aubrey Edwards talked about that was crazy how many matches that she was reffing in the course of 2 days. Tony Khan booked the whole thing on a napkin in 15 minutes just so they could get through it and all that stuff. So I mean, we have the coronavirus that we have to deal with. And when are we actually going to get fans back? Right. Obviously, right now we have 15% capacity just at Daly's Place because it's an outdoor venue, and they are just booking people basically in family and friend pods, and they have to stay away from everybody else. When are we going to be back to full? Obviously, I don't think until we have a vaccine that we're going to be back to normal anytime soon. Japan, obviously, they have much better control over everything because everybody was already used to wearing masks. If they're sick, people wore masks because they had some decency to try not to get other people sick. And that kind of, now they're at 50% capacity on the shows that they have there. Everybody has to wear a mask and all that fun stuff. So at least they're doing it safely. But here, I have no idea when it's actually, I'm thinking until we get a vaccine that's widespread, we're probably not going to have 50%. We're probably not going to go past 25% capacity anytime soon, even if we get to that. And I mean, Florida is probably about it. I don't have much inkling of other states opening up too much more. Some are even shutting back down. So, I mean, we will see how it goes. Obviously, it's a problem. And even if we take, the government out of it, I still think a lot of people are going to be very nervous to go to packed shows. And that's going to be a problem as well, of who's going to actually want to go out and get, put into a sardine can. I mean, there's already things like, people already, when they had Comic-Con, they'd call it the Comic-Con cough when you came home, because you would get sick because somebody would make you sick. Because if once you pack 250,000 people together for 3 days, somebody is going to, basically everybody's going to get sick because they're going to pass it around. So, I mean, that's just a basic cold or anything like this, not something that's going to make you really, sick. And obviously we have all of our views on that. But I don't think we're going to be back to having fans in any serious capacity until we have a vaccine, at least in this country. But a very strange thing to happen 6 months in, and now they've been dealing it with for 6 months. I think AEW has probably made the best out of the situation that they can, and having Daly's Place as being owned by the Khan family is probably one of the best coincidences, or the most serendipitous thing to occur to AEW, to have that venue. And they set it up correctly the first time. They're shooting towards the stage, so even if you can't see the fans, doesn't matter, because you're seeing at least something in the background, versus how they did have it set up at Daly's Place when they were shooting from the side across the stage, or parallel to the stage, when it was full. Trae.
You can watch whatever show, the first show that they did in Daly's Place, like Fight for the Fallen or whatever last year, and it's so bizarre to see that like shot, for being full of people. It's so different. Like AEW, figured it out so much quicker than WWE as far as the pandemic thing, but
You lost.
I lost it. I lost it again. It was about the pandemic, and it was about AEW's response to the pandemic. And sometimes, if I just start with what I know I was talking about, I'll find it again. But it's not happening right now. So maybe if you guys start talking again, I'll remember.
All right, Dave.
Personally, for the whole coronavirus thing, I'm not in my head. I'm not thinking about when will we go back to fans, and when's the set date where we can do it again, because I feel like I'm just setting myself up for disappointment. But AEW has absolutely handled it extremely well. The first week where there was no cheering at all, that's just bizarre. I mean, go to a football game without a crowd, you're like, what are these guys even doing? So, but I do think AEW handled it very well, and I understand the whole letting friends and family in and displacing them throughout the crowd. There's actually an indie show occurring in the town over from where I'm at right now. I thought about going, and I was just at the last minute, I was like, not worth it. Don't want to go.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah, that has been an issue with some of the larger gatherings. Trae, did you get it back?
I remembered, because I was keeping track at one point, and I think it was maybe like sometime early in August that we crossed the threshold that there have actually been more episodes of Dynamite in front of no audience than there was in front of an actual audience. It may be changing now because there's been a partial audience, but there was a point, because this happened, 4 or 5 months into Dynamite's existence, that there is a period of time in Dynamite's history that there were actually more episodes in front of no fans than there have been in front of fans.
Caleb, how do you think they've done with having to do this shift and dealing with the issues at hand?
Sure. Well, Trey, I think to your point about the more shows in front of no fans than in front of fans, I think that probably would have been Jim Cornette's prediction all along. Um, Sorry, just had to throw that one out there. Pre-COVID or not. I think that they've done a great job. And to be honest, I was watching both AEW and WWE pretty much religiously at the time when this all hit. And I honestly could not bring myself to watch Raw because of the lack of fans. It felt so weird, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, what is wrong about this? The lack of noise. And they did their best, and I know they've started to allow more people in now, but I started literally just watching AEW because all they had to do was put 30 wrestlers distanced around the ring to make a little bit of noise, and it made all the difference. I know that they've been doing, or at least I'm told that they're doing pretty regularly tests at the door every week, so they're making sure, taking the precautions to make sure that everyone is safe. But just having even a little bit of ambiance was definitely the right call because it made that program so much more watchable and enjoyable instead of having no fans in the building whatsoever. Other than that, I don't really have too much thoughts about it other than what you said, which is exactly true, that they are extremely lucky to have basically sole ownership over Daly's Place. The ability to film their episodes there or, do them live, have that owned by the Khan family, because otherwise they really would be out of luck. There's no way that they're running in the Amway Center or in TD Garden in Boston. They're not doing that in this COVID era, if not for owning Daly's Place. So it's really kept them afloat, and I think it's an absolute godsend for the company that they've had that venue.
And the biggest coincidence is that they signed that huge TV deal like 4 weeks before this happened as well. So right. Would that have even come into play? Though they've done really well throughout, so they probably still would have gotten the TV deal anyways. Darryl, you want to wrap up this topic?
I'm just trying to think of some of the smaller promotions and what they have either been able or not been able to do. So like Ring of Honor, I'm not sure necessarily.
They're back.
If I know that they're back, but like I don't know how long they were without TV. Mm-hmm. I know that Impact was doing, like complete empty arena. They didn't even have fans around their ringside area. At least the
fans anyway?
What's that?
Sorry.
He said, did they have fans anyway?
I don't know if it's bigger than like a local indie show would have, but they would have an audience, let's put it that way. But like I watched a couple of episodes and they didn't have an audience, not even other wrestlers sitting out in the audience to make some noise. It was just the one dude that used to be a WWE announcer that's now the Impact announcer. Whose name I can't. Yeah, that guy. It was just him on commentary, and it was like, this is painful to it was painful to watch.
I also feel that way about Josh Matthews' commentary.
But you know the saying, like, the silence was deafening. That's how the show felt, where it was just nothing, and then like a little bit of commentary or somebody giving a promo, but no response at all. So yeah, AEW is doing really good, and they don't have the cheesy Thunderdome thing going on that WWE has that I've only seen in pictures and like short little video clips. But it's just absolutely horrible. And apparently baseball was doing something with like CGI fans.
NBA was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
at least there's some audience to make some noise.
Yeah. So like AEW and WWE were the only ones who basically did not stop their weekly production of everything. ROH, they started producing sort of like documentary type stuff to fill the TV space, but they also did shut down from doing shows up until a few weeks ago when they started their Pure tournament. And then obviously New Japan, they shut down from March until June, and now they're finally getting some fans back in. So, but strangely enough, New Japan, ROH, and AEW did not release anybody during that time, and actually New Japan even had executives take pay cuts so they could continue paying their wrestlers their full salaries and all that stuff. Daryl.
So you mentioned ROH was producing something to fill their airtime.
Yes.
ROH is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting.
Correct.
That owns hundreds of television stations. How many of those stations actually air Ring of Honor?
Probably all of them, but at like 2 a.m.
Okay, I didn't think very many of them at all did.
Yeah, none of them in a good time slot. They're all in horrible time slots.
Okay, which is better than what I was thinking. But
and they always
I know
they always upload all their
can,
TV to their website, so you can always watch all their TV for free.
I was going to say you can get ROH on Fight.
Right. Yep.
Because I keep getting notifications like every Monday of the new Ring of Honor is on Fight TV.
All right, so actually, I just came up with a question while we were talking. Who of the 5 of us has been to a show? Is it I think Trae has gone to one of the live shows. I'm not sure if Dave, did you go to one?
Never.
No.
I've never been to a wrestling show ever. I stopped.
Oh.
I was watching during the Attitude Era, stopped in 2000-ish. I didn't start back up again until very late 2017. At which point I was too busy with work to actually go to a show when they were going to like Charlotte or Raleigh. Then I was in Japan for the last 2 years. And believe it or not, the WWE does not travel to Okinawa, Japan, this tiny little island near Taiwan.
Yeah, but New Japan
So I've never been able to see a show.
Should have gone to a New Japan show.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
So is it just Trae?
Yeah, I have not been to an AEW show. I've been to some other wrestling shows, and funny story, I had plans with a coworker to go to New Jersey for Blood and Guts. And Blood and Guts didn't happen. I was so excited. We were starting to look at tickets and really get ready to go. And we started getting this rumblings that, COVID was becoming a thing. We said maybe we should hold off before we, buy it and double check. And sure enough, it was that week that it was canceled. And we did not go. So I'm kicking myself and really dying to get to an AEW show as soon as we can.
Yeah, I bought tickets for the show that was supposed to be April 15th in Boston. So that was 2 weeks after when Blood and Guts was supposed to take place. So I still have tickets. I think it's now the current scheduled is April, I don't know, somewhere mid-April of next year, but I'm guessing that's going to get pushed. And so I'm holding the tickets, but I did go to the show on October 9th, which was the second show in Boston, and that was ridiculously fun. Like I said, they had the Kenny Omega, Joey Janela lights out match at the end of the show on Dark, and that was just amazing. I took my dad with me. He hadn't seen wrestling for a really long time. He hadn't watched anything other than WWF way back in the day, and he thought it was freaking amazing. So that was a good time. So only me and Trae have gone to a show for AEW. Daryl, were you going to go to the one on the 15th?
I don't recall if I was planning to go to that one. I do want to go to an AEW show. And if I'm able to go, I know I'm going to have to take advantage of their sensory, whatever it is, rooms. Not because of an autism thing, but because of too many dings to the head. Loud noises and bright lights startle me.
Yep.
So it would just be better for me to not wind up, getting startled by angry yelling people. Plus just the overall neuro fatigue of, that much mental stimulation. So it would basically wind up being me paying a lot of money to go to a show and then watching it on TV, I guess. But it would still be a really good experience, probably.
Yeah.
But just getting to Boston.
All right. So my wife will not be able to pawn my ticket off to you.
You know that they're not going to come to Manchester.
Right. Well, at least not anytime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, even WWE would only, if they did a Manchester stop, it was like one of the house shows a couple nights after the Raw.
Yeah, recently.
Or a couple nights before the SmackDown.
Yeah, back in 2000, 2001, I saw a couple Raws and a couple SmackDowns in Manchester. But that's when they were hitting everybody because everybody sold out all the time, and they would do in a loop. They just do Manchester, Boston, Providence, Hartford, all in one shot. So, yeah,
they did at least one pay-per-view in Manchester. I think it was Backlash 2005, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's been quite a while since I stopped watching.
Triple H is also from Nashua, so maybe. He was still living there at the time and was like, oh, let's go to the arena that's really close to where I used to live, Dad.
I'm pretty sure he lived in Bedford at the time. Yeah, he was living in Bedford near that. All right, so let's finish this off here. And what has been your favorite moment of AEW so far? Let's start off with Dave.
Oh, man. I've been trying to think about it. Because I knew the question was coming, and I've got to narrow down to 4-ish. Definitely the debut of Jon Moxley when he comes through the crowd, takes out Jericho, and then Omega on the poker chips. Jon Moxley with the eye patch. MJF doing anything, and then kind of an off the ball one. It was when Luchasaurus injured his quadriceps hamstring, and he came out unexpectedly to save Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy from the Dark Order. And if you go back and listen to it, the pop he gets is awesome. And the Stadium Stampede.
Trae.
Man, I really, my impulse is to just say Eddie Kingston's promos. That's been the highlight of AEW for the last few months. And just Moxley, man. I've been such a fan of Jon Moxley. There have been guys that I'm a huge wrestling nerd, so there are a few people who I hadn't heard of before AEW, but mostly I had, and it's just been such a joy. Sammy Guevara and Darby Allin, these guys to get a chance to shine on national TV, and just how happy that it makes me that there is Major League American Pro Wrestling on national TV, and it isn't owned by Vince McMahon.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. It's honestly been so difficult to pick what my favorite moment or moments are. Even to narrow it down to top 5, I think is wicked difficult. Honestly, just rambling off a few, I would say the Moxley debut, 100%. I really loved Cody's promos during his program with Jericho. There were some Cody promos that were just, there was one, I'm trying to remember, I don't think it was the Go Home show, but maybe a week or two before, where people were saying it was his hard times. There was an incredible promo. He talked about the silver spoon in Jericho's mouth, just as same as his. I think that was an incredible promo. I mentioned him earlier, the lexicon of Jericho. He didn't call it the list, but of the guys he wouldn't face. Just funny story about that clip. My dad used to watch WWE in the era of, Superfly Snuka and those guys, and he hasn't seen wrestling in years. And I showed him that clip on YouTube, and he laughed his butt off, and he just thought it was the funniest. He's like, this is just like I remember it. Just funny, good pro wrestling promos. So it really actually, in a weird way, my dad's not a wrestling fan in general, but it was a funny connection there. I would also say Eddie Kingston's match and promo during the Open TNT Challenge, I think, was a huge highlight for me. There's almost too many to name. There's so many moments that I think we'll look back at the first year of AEW and say, that's a classic moment in a sense. Moxley almost joining the Inner Circle. I mentioned that earlier. That's another favorite for me. Almost too many to name. I think that there's been a lot of great moments, and if I had to really, really pick one, I think the one that makes me laugh is MJF's election promo, the first one he cut. It was about 5 minutes at least, but it was just a pleasure to listen to. He probably wrote it all himself, and the moment where he said, presidents or people putting themselves over, and he said, "That's old hat, brother." And when he did that, that's the biggest laugh they got out of me all year. So I would probably pick his election promo there as my favorite moment from the year.
All right, and Darryl.
There's a lot of really good ones. And the Jericho thing where he was naming all the people and then, just kept renaming Moxley reminded me of his 1004 holds promo from WCW back in the day, where like every other thing was armbar.
That was great.
And then I really liked the Jericho versus Orange Cassidy debate, where there was the question about environmental policy. And Orange Cassidy just came off with like a very well thought out statement about the environment, and then didn't say anything to any of the other ones, other than you're debating a guy that doesn't talk. Ha ha ha. Sue is probably the unsung hero of AEW. Trent's mom is a joy. I love her. Let's just not put her on a forklift. And anybody that watched WCW after Vince Russo took over will get the reference there to the Judy Bagwell on a forklift match that Buff had against somebody. I don't even remember. Yeah, but it's just Judy Bagwell on a forklift, because why the fuck not?
The middle finger was the best.
Yeah.
I popped so hard because I thought she was going to do the weak Orange Cassidy thumbs up. And then she flips it up and gives the middle finger. It was great.
Yeah.
Sue episode of Dark. Oh my god. Her on Dark with the Dark Order.
On BTE.
Where she was throwing stuff at them.
On BTE, yeah.
Oh, that was my BTE segment.
Yeah, I was saying
I saw that.
We're stood there. Mr. Brody Lee goes, "You sell for Sue."
That was great. Any other favorites before we wrap it up from Darryl here?
Yeah, I'm going to say that my favorite match of AEW was the Cody versus Dustin match. And let's see, if I've got to do like a favorite moment, would be Cody winning the TNT title.
All right, man, I had so many favorite moments throughout. Caleb already mentioned the list of Jericho, or the lexicon of Jericho. That was funny. The bubbly bunch segments that they did during the beginning of the COVID, I thought those were pretty hilarious. I thought one of my favorite matches was Orange Cassidy versus Pac, when he was set up to do the the Black Arrow that Orange Cassidy would roll out of the ring on the other side, and then he'd put him back in, and he'd go up and he'd roll out the other side, and then he caught him rolling the other way. The smile that Orange Cassidy made when he realized that he was when he was figured out was great. I really liked the parking lot match that they just had, Best Friends and Santana Ortiz. I thought that was probably one of the best hardcore style matches that I had seen in like forever. Of course, there was the really crazy one, Moxley and Omega in the Lights Out match early on in the run. And of course, Stadium Stampede. I watched that like 4 times in a row because it was just so great, with Matt Jackson giving Sammy Guevara 100 yards of Northern Light suplexes. I thought that was awesome. Really fun. And then, man, there's just so much good. The Britt Baker stuff when she was training and she was dragging the tiny little weight behind her, but it was actually Rebel that was pushing her in the car, and she needed weight taken off when it was just like a 2.5 pound plate that she was messing with. That was great. And as she's wheeling herself up the wheelchair ramp and Rebel and the trainer are cheering her on, it cuts back to her, and then it cuts back and suddenly Tony Schiavone is there as well. Like, so she did such good stuff after she was injured with the Rolls Royce and all those segments. Those were great. There's so much good stuff that happened on AEW this year that I just had a ton of fun with. Trae.
If we are making a point to bring up the greatest matches in AEW, the Kenny Omega Adam Page against the Young Bucks match from Revolution. Probably my second favorite 2-on-2 tag match ever. Only second to the Young Bucks and Golden Lovers match from Long Beach.
That was a good match. Yeah. We had the crazy match of the ladder match for the AAA titles between the Lucha Bros and oh my god,
De La Muerta? Something like that.
Matt Jackson taking the Canadian Destroyer off the top of the ladder through a table. That was sick. And then go for it.
And you and I raved this week about how much we loved the dog collar match between Cody and Mr. Brody Lee.
Yeah,
that's probably my favorite match on Dynamite.
Nice. All right. Before we wrap it up this evening, anybody else got anything they want to talk about as far as AEW goes? We're already sitting at like 2 hours and 40 minutes here. I don't know if we want to touch on the future of AEW because that's probably an even longer discussion. So maybe we'll come back with that in the future.
I want quick predictions of who has each title in 1 year.
All right. Dave, let's start with Darryl because he's the one throwing it out. What are your predictions?
I had already mentioned either Britt or Penelope for the women 1 year from now. For the TNT, let's go with Darby. And for the world title, let's say Hangman.
All right, Dave, what do you got?
I agree with Hangman for the world title. I think Kenny's going to take it from Mox, then Paige will win it back win it from Omega. I'd say women's. I think Chris Statlander upon recovery from her ACL surgery. TNT, sky's the limit. I mean, that's what I like about that title is it's really anyone's game at that point. Women's tag team titles. I think Private Party's got a shot. If I had to pick an underdog, I'd probably go with Private Party.
All right, Darryl, you didn't give tag team titles. What are your tag team titles?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about tag titles. Let's go with Lucha Bros.
All right. Caleb.
And are you writing these down?
I am. I'll come back and I'll write them down. We'll review in a year. Caleb.
All right. For each title, my predictions, I would say, are as follows. I'd say the TNT title, I would really like to see it held by a homegrown AEW talent. The first one to pop up into my mind, I think, would be Jungle Boy. I would love to see Jungle Boy have a bit of a singles run And even though I think Jurassic Express would be great in the tag title picture, I think that he's going to be a breakout star, and I think this second year of AEW is going to be his time. So Jungle Boy for TNT title. I would say the tag team titles, honestly, I think it should be FTR, and I think they should be on their second reign. I think that they should have a feud with someone in between now and then. I'm not sure who's going to take it off of them, but I do think that they should be established as the first, I believe they'd be the first, two-time AEW Tag Team Champions. So I think it should be FTR a year from now. The Women's Championship, great question. If Penelope Ford continues to improve and be as awesome as she is, I really like her. She really impressed me in that match that she had against Shida. So I'd like to see Ford. Whether or not a year is too soon for her, maybe it's a little further down the line, but I think she'd be my pick just if I'm saying personal preference, because I think she's great. And I think her with Miro and Kip Sabian is a great idea. And then lastly, the world title. This is going to sound crazy maybe, but I think it should be MJF. And my prediction is that the next champion will be Kenny Omega. I believe he's going to take it off of Moxley as a heel, rightly so. I think that eventually Hangman will win it from him. And my belief, this is just me, I think that the money is in the chase for Hangman. I think Hangman should have a short reign of maybe 2 months. When he wins the title, MJF should come up behind him, give him a low blow, set up their feud, and MJF should wing it from Hangman within the first couple of months, because you don't want to overexpose your top babyface, and I think that MJF should be the title holder. I think he's, the sky's the limit for MJF.
All right, and Trey.
My predictions as to who will be the champions 1 year from today, October 10th, 2021. AEW World Champion, I think Kenny Omega. The World Tag Team Champions, I picked the Young Bucks. The TNT Champion, I picked Cody, but with the caveat that it will be his third or fourth reign. And the Women's Championship, Dr. Britt.
All right, and lastly for me, I'm going to go for the tag titles. I'm also going to go for the Bucks. For the women's, I think we have a long shot here, but I'm going to go with Ivelisse. I think we're going to have I think Britt Baker is going to take it off of Hikaru Shida, and we might have a short Penelope Ford run before Ivelisse sweeps in to take it after that. As far as the TNT Championship, I like your pick of Jungle Boy, but I think you're a year early. I think it's going to be 2 years for Jungle Boy. I think it's going to be Darby Allin. And for the World Championship, I think it's still going to be Kenny Omega at that point, because I don't see Kenny Omega taking that championship until Revolution in February. So I think he's going to hold it for more than 6 months, but I have a feeling it's going to be just after a year from now when he is going to lose it. So he's going to hold it, but it's only going to be a few more weeks. He probably is going to lose it at Full Gear next year. So that is my predictions for this.
I keep forgetting that we're only talking about like 4 pay-per-views a year. I'm sitting here thinking there's so much more opportunity for belts to change hands. And I suppose while they could change hands on television, it's far more likely that they wait until a big pay-per-view.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Trey.
I'm going to throw out a question. In the next year, do they pull the trigger on changing the world title at least once on Dynamite?
Yes.
Yes.
Within the next year, I don't think so.
It
One time.
would be one of the named episodes of Dynamite.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like a
they
Fighter
should have-
Fest or a Fight for the Fallen or, Uncle Joe's Crab Shack sponsored, Bucket Brigade, whatever. I forget what the other named episodes are, but like it's going to be one of the Dynamite Super Show sort of things.
All right, so I'm the odd man out on this one. All 4 of you say yes, and I'm the only one that said no.
I actually say no too, but
Okay.
I say that they should.
I am with you as well. I think they should, but actually, I don't think they should in the next year. They should at some point, maybe within the next
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the year after that. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe let's go out on a long shot. Let's say they do it. Who is going to be the trios champions a year from now? Daryl.
Either SCU or Lucha Express.
All right, Dave.
Come back to me. I gotta think.
All right, Caleb.
Who the hell's Lucha Express? Jungle Express. The one
Jurassic Express.
The dinosaur, the boy, and the other boy.
Caleb.
I think it should be Eddie Kingston and the Lucha Bros.
Oh, bastard! You took my pick.
That's what I was gonna say.
Listen, there's too much opportunity for Eddie Kingston. Like, he needs to continue to do things. Like, I'm getting my Eddie Kingston fix off of BTE right now, and it's not enough. So give him some sort of championship. And I'm sorry I stole that.
All right, Dave, you going with that one as well?
I agree with that, Eddie. And if not Lucha Brothers, then definitely Eddie in some form, either with those two or Butcher and the Blade.
Or do you think it would be Death Triangle with Pac coming back?
That's my second.
Trey.
Screwed up my pick. Okay, so my pick is that the program over those trios titles will be Eddie Kingston and the Butcher and the Blade versus Death Triangle.
Oh, that would be a good one. That would be awesome. Let's hope that happens. Anybody?
Get the Death Triangle back, damn it.
But let's get a heel elite in there as well.
Yes,
yes. Young Bucks and Kenny.
Well, that's what I'm
All
thinking.
heel.
I'm thinking that the heel elite will, on the same night, is Kenny Omega is going to win the championship, and the Bucks are going to take the titles off of FTR. I think that's going to happen on the same night, and then we have a heel elite going forward after that. That's my idea. All right, let's wrap it up here. Final comments. Let's go through. Dave, why don't you give your final comments before we wrap it up here?
Is this where I say my podcast or just final comments?
Both, I guess.
Okay. Final comment. I think we should do another roundtable in the near future, and it should be future AEW fantasy booking.
All right. Let's do that. Let's do that around Thanksgiving. How's that sound?
I'd be down.
All right.
But for myself, if you want to look at stupid memes, you can go to my Instagram, MightyMouse0913. Or you can find my personal podcast on mostly current events and history at Russo's Podcast About Anything. Season 2 is starting very soon.
Nice. Daryl.
Yeah, so I'm down for a Thanksgiving time thing of fantasy booking. We need to get Dustin, the guy that does the wrestling show down in Pennsylvania, to be on there.
Yeah,
maybe he can steal our ideas and implement those in
Pro Warrior Alliance.
Yeah, Pro Warrior. I was going to say Warrior Pro. I'm going to college, and if you're into politics, I'm also running for governor of New Hampshire. So the election is coming up in just a few weeks, so final push there. I am encouraging people to vote absentee. Basically to spare the 90-year-old ladies that are the ballot clerks and poll workers from possibly getting COVID. So, yeah, definitely vote. Educate yourself about who the candidates are. Don't just vote for MJF because he calls John Moxley a dictator. And in this scenario, I don't know if Joe Biden or Donald Trump is the dictator and which one is MJF. But there are other options, so just educate yourself on that. My personal website is darrylwperry.com.
All right, Caleb.
Sure. Other than final comments, not much. You can follow me on Twitter. It's Caleb S. Johnson. Literally, it's just all either wrestling related or somewhat nerdy statements on whatever's going on in the world. Otherwise, I do have one thing I want to pose. Last question, I promise. In the next year, I should say, of AEW, do we see the forbidden door of the relationship with New Japan opening up at all?
Yes.
Tiny bit.
We will see a New Japan talent in AEW, on an AEW show, yes.
Right,
we already have
well.
that with
ask.
John Moxley.
Well, he's
John
not.
Moxley is the IWGP US
Yeah, but
champion.
he's not a full-time New Japan guy.
That's not what you said. You did not say full-time. You just said a New Japan talent.
Let's go full-time, originally a New Japan talent who still works there, blah, 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 blah.
Maybe.
Tanahashi was on Dynamite this week.
In a wrestling capacity, in a match.
David Finley will probably have a match.
All right, Caleb, what'd you say?
I was just saying I appreciate you clarifying my statement for me. That's what I meant. A full-time New Japan talent coming to AEW, whether it be for a program or a one-off.
I think David Finley will have a match for the TNT title.
Oh, that's actually a good one. Dave?
I think that the better half, or the Japanese half of the Golden Lovers, will make an appearance in the future.
I hope to see Kota Ibushi. How about you, Trey?
You got me thinking about David Finlay versus Cody right now, and that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So we all say probably there will be a full-time New Japan talent coming over to do at least a match in AEW.
Probably. I think it's definite, yeah.
All right, awesome. I agree with that. Trey, final parting words on the year retrospective.
Wrestling is awesome, and you should watch it, and you can follow me on Twitter at Rebel Historian. The end.
All right. So I think the last year, this has been a really exciting year, a very strange year for a startup company hitting COVID 6 months into their existence on TV, but they're in a very good position going forward, having the TV deal with TNT for guaranteed the next 3 years with an option for the fourth, which is going to be very interesting because they're going to be coming up to negotiations at the same time as WWE. Imagine if Fox be like, okay, we'll give you a quarter of what we're giving WWE for your product, and just like completely undercutting them. That would be crazy. But yeah, it should be pretty awesome. So we are going to hopefully do a future booking episode. We'll talk about that privately and hopefully we can get Dustin on, and his life has been crazy lately, and we still haven't heard from Justin, and I'm a little worried about him at this point because he has just kind of fallen off the face of the map. So hopefully he is doing okay, looking forward to the upcoming years of AEW, and of course New Japan has kind of found their stride once again after a bit of a clunky comeback from the break that they took off. So good to see there. So thanks for watching and listening, everybody. If you're listening to this as a podcast and you made it through the entire 2 hours and 55 minutes that we have gone so far, you can get this.
Let's go for a full 3 hours, and I'll ask the question, since you mentioned possibly moving to Fox. What do they rename the TNT title? Or do they keep it the TNT title, but then defend it on Fox?
Oh, yeah. It could be, I don't know. We'll see.
Or they have two shows. One can be on TNT, one can be on Fox. And the TNT title remains on TNT.
Yeah. Or they could name it the TV title and then and get over that, I guess. That would probably be a way to go. But not even specifically Fox, but think about the negotiations coming up at the same time. Any network could undercut WWE by a ton and get a property that is probably going to be growing over the next multiple years, especially with the decline of WWE continuing to crash, unless obviously WWE figures out how to turn things around, and that's probably only going to happen once Vince is no longer in charge of WWE. At least that's my thought.
Well, and let's look a little outside of the TV box. And what if Hulu or Netflix entered into the bidding wars?
Which is a possibility now that everybody has streaming. Obviously, you got Amazon. They own Twitch, so at this point, so you never know. So you got huge players in that market, and we have networks going down. Showtime was actually an original proposal for AEW. to be over there. So getting on a premium channel wouldn't surprise me. But of course, obviously the cheaper streaming services would probably be a lot more likely to get pulled over instead of a premium, because those are usually added on packages. But I mean, now we have HBO Plus, we got Disney Plus, and Disney's going to pull a lot of the Fox stuff in over there, I'm guessing, since they own Fox. Hulu, Netflix is probably the lowest on the list at this point. They seem to be going downward. I think NBC has a stake in Hulu, so that would kind of make the most sense over there. I think even who else has a stake in Hulu? It's NBC and CBS.
CBS, I know, because there's an old 90s
Disney
show that was on CBS that they have on Hulu.
You're right, and Disney as well, because you can get Disney Plus and Hulu as a package, so they have a stake. So Hulu's probably the biggest. And ESPN Plus, geez, yeah. Well, that's again Disney, since they own ABC as well as Fox. So
the mouse owns everything.
The mouse owns everything. So yeah.
You got to think about that. Within the next 5 years, the mouse is going to own WWE too. So
right,
that's my prediction. By the way,
so would that make it better or worse?
They did well with Marvel, so I'm not completely close to the idea.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't like what they did with the Star Trek Wars.
Well, I was going to say, they might do what they did with Marvel, or
they might pull Star Wars.
Do what they did to Star Wars. So who knows?
That would be a very strange one if I don't see a big company buying WWE, because I think that would be like the crash of WWE, just because wrestling is such a strange product compared to everything else that these companies do. It's not live sports because it's predetermined, so you need somebody to write it, and that pool is small. And we see, even with WWE hiring Hollywood writers, can't turn this thing around. Though, could that be completely all Vince, or is it just the TV writers can't write wrestling because they don't know what works?
It's Vince.
It's Vince.
Oh, yeah. We all know.
For my 2 cents in the whole streaming platforms possibly taking a crack at this, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the way they want to go. I think they want to stay on television because the audience that they are after, that they're not currently pulling, are we see it on BTE, 50 for 50 or 50 for 55. They're looking for more television viewers. And I think the people who would watch on Netflix or Hulu are the people who are already watching, right? It's that younger crowd. I think they really are after the television crowd who might not have a subscription to a lot of streaming services. So that's just my 2 cents.
But now you have tons of streaming services, Hulu and YouTube, all doing live TV. So what will the landscape look in 5 years in the live transmission of television shows, regardless if it's broadcast or not, and entertainment in general?
Being, broadcast. That's a good point.
They might not have a
Dark's
choice.
doing well on YouTube, so.
What was that?
Dark's doing well on YouTube.
I am? Yeah.
No, Dark is.
Oh, Dark.
That's facetiousness, by the way.
Yeah. Well, it's doing better than it has been. So it's actually grown, and AEW's subscriber base on YouTube has actually grown quite a lot in the past year. All right, we just crossed over the 3-hour mark. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for watching and listening to That's Wrestling. You can grab this as a podcast on all your favorite podcast apps. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you can watch all these shows live on YouTube, because we do them all live on YouTube. You can follow the link to the channel in the show notes on your podcast app. We also have a Discord you can come hang out with. The link is in the show notes in the description. And if you have any mailbag questions, all that fun stuff, you can send those to Eric at that'swrestling.com. You can follow That's Wrestling at That's Wrestling 1, the number 1 at the end of that, because whoever has at That's Wrestling hasn't touched it since 2012, and I wish I could have it, but I don't. So thanks for Darryl W, Perry, Caleb Johnson, Trae Wisecarver, and Dave Colarusso. My name is Eric LaRoche, and thanks for watching and listening to That's Wrestling. See you later, guys.
Bye.